evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 4th meeting of the Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals. I got to ask everyone to take a moment, please silence their cell phones, and please note that this meeting is being taped by FCTV. I'd like to start by introducing members of the board, starting at the audience's left, moving to the right. It's Gerald Patamus. He is an associate member. Frank Duffy, who is a full voting member. Mark Finneran, who is a full voting member. My name is James Morris. I'm currently serving as chair. Scott Peterson, who is our vice chairman. Suzanne Murphy, who is our clerk, and Tony Petrucci, who is an associate member. We're also joined this evening by George Pucci, special town counsel, Noreen Stockman, our zoning administrator, and Ashley DeMello, recording secretary. This is a continuation of comprehensive permit requested for 0 and 375 Sandwich Road, requesting a development to include 300 residential dwelling units. Tonight we have Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent. We will begin after a few disclosures with her providing an overview of the proposal. Does anyone need to make a disclosure that they'll be recording this evening?
Elizabeth Saito with the Falmouth Enterprise. I'm recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishes to record any portion of this meeting tonight? Just please come up to the podium, identify yourself, and let us know that you'll be recording. Mr. Duffy, I believe you have a disclosure that you'd like to make.
Yes, I missed the last session or hearing on March the 7th. So I have watched the entire proceedings on television, and I've read all the materials that was considered at that meeting, and I'll file a statement to comply with the Mullen Rule.
The record will still reflect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I too missed the meeting, and
Jerry, just turn your microphone on. Thank you.
I too missed the meeting, and I submitted.
Green light.
Okay, I too missed the meeting, and I submitted certification that I watched it on FCTV.
Thank you very much. Let's make sure the written form is filed with the record. As indicated, we have Amy Lowell, wastewater superintendent, who's joining us this evening to give some testimony about the overall proposal.
Good evening. Thank you. I submitted a comment letter on this project proposal last year and also provide a referral on this project last year and attended one previous meeting on this subject. I'm going to review my conclusions about this in general, and then I'm happy to answer questions. It's been noted many times, but I will state again that this project is in the watershed to Great Pond. Great Pond is significantly impacted by nitrogen, and nitrogen that is loading Great Pond comes primarily from septic systems in the watershed. The state issued a total maximum daily load limit for Great Pond because of its impaired water quality. And last year, the state issued new watershed permit regulations, which require the town to prepare a watershed plan and then apply for a watershed permit for that water body. And the goal of the watershed permitting process is to ensure that the towns ultimately reach their TMDLs, their total maximum daily loads, for the ponds, the impaired ponds, and ultimately improve the water quality of those ponds. The town is designed, so the town prepared a targeted watershed management plan for Great Pond, and that was approved by the state, and the town is now proceeding to design the first step of that implementation plan. That first phase of implementation is a collection system to collect wastewater from a portion of the lower watershed to Great Pond and convey that up to our existing main wastewater treatment facility and recharge at expanded beds north of that facility. The design of that project is $3.8 million, and there will be an additional appropriation to fund the construction of that project next April of 2025. That project will remove, the first phase of the project will remove about 2,000, or it's estimated 2,890 kilograms of nitrogen from the watershed. The second phase that would follow is estimated to remove about 3,300 kilograms of nitrogen per year from the watershed. Those are both lower watershed sewering projects. Meeting the TMDL for Great Pond will also require a number of other steps that are outlined in the plan, the town's plan. Project proponents' original proposal for this project envisioned connecting to the town's sewer system. There is no existing sewer main in the vicinity of this project. The closest sewer main is 1.4 miles away. And more importantly, the town's treatment facility and most importantly, discharge facility do not have capacity for additional treated wastewater discharge. That it is no small matter to connect an additional facility to an additional development to the wastewater plant. If the town did wish to do that, we would need to file a notice of project change to our previous targeted watershed management plan for Great Pond, and we would need to go through the review process for that, get it approved by the regulatory agencies, and then launch an entirely new plan to comply with the TMDL for Great Pond. That is, and within that, the biggest obstacle is our discharge. We have very limited treated wastewater discharge opportunity in this town. We have an existing groundwater discharge permit that is very limited, and it is in the watershed to other coastal ponds, which also have concerns. Given those limitations, the only viable option for wastewater management from this site is an on-site treatment and discharge facility, which is what is currently envisioned for this project. The wastewater plant for the facility will be permitted by the state's Department of Environmental Protection. That treatment facility would not be overseen or permitted by the town because it would be over 10,000 gallons per day. So permits for groundwater discharge of that volume are permitted by the Department of Environmental Protection. So they're not within my jurisdiction or within the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. It's DEP jurisdiction. The DEP standard groundwater discharge permit limit is 10 milligrams per liter for a facility of that size. Many plants, small plants, do struggle to meet that limit. The project is estimated to add about 700 kilograms of nitrogen per year to the Great Pond watershed if it meets a TMDL, or excuse me, a discharge, an effluent discharge limit of 10 milligrams per liter. Any nitrogen load that's discharged on this site and not offset by the project will need to be offset at a future date by the town. And that will have significant cost. In order for us ultimately to meet the TMDL, the total maximum daily load number for Great Pond, and to improve Great Pond water quality. So I have said previously in the comments that and I've noted that the project proponent has said that he plans to and can and will install a treatment facility that would meet a lower limit of 3 milligrams per liter. I would commend that. If that can be, if that's something that the project proponent can commit to, that would reduce the impact of this project on the watershed or on Great Pond. And so that treatment plant would need to have a history of meeting that kind of a limit. And the basics of it is it would need a nitrification process and a denitrification process. And as I said, a history of performance of that quality. Importantly, a treatment facility needs oversight and maintenance in order to perform properly. You can't just set up a treatment facility and let it go. It needs regular, frequent maintenance visits and inspections and sampling beyond what's required by the state's permit. Generally, the state's permit requires monthly sampling and reporting for a facility of this size. But to really keep a system running properly, you would need to inspect it certainly more frequently than monthly, and sample at least weekly to see how the performance is going and to make adjustments and continue to do the best you can with that treatment plant. We've suggested that the project proponent do what they can to offset their nitrogen discharge within the watershed. That's a difficult thing to do. I don't want to pretend that's easy, but that obviously that would whatever they can do to decrease the nitrogen impact on Great Pond would be greatly appreciated. There are a couple of smaller things. Other than reducing the number of units would obviously reduce the nitrogen load to the watershed, and maintaining the best treatment performance they can. The smaller things they can do are not using fertilizers because it's in the watershed, and that to Great Pond, and that also contributes nitrogen and phosphorus load to the watershed, and keeping as much of the vegetation as possible on the site. Removing vegetation and converting that to impervious surface definitely increases the nitrogen impact of the project. So that's my summary of the project and its impacts on Great Pond, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Start with you, Tony.
Amy, thank you for being here tonight. When the application is put into DEP, as they will have to do, what role, I know it's probably limited, but what role does the town take in all of that? How do you monitor that? Can you answer questions? Can you ask questions of DEP during that process? When are you notified?
So any DEP groundwater discharge permit has a public hearing process, and so they'll issue a draft groundwater discharge permit, and they take public comment during that period. It's usually a 30-day comment period, and so the town can comment during that period, as can anybody else, I believe.
Will you take part in that?
Certainly.
All right, because I think it's vitally important to do as much as we can to influence the outcome. You mentioned that the standard system that the state might approve would be 10 milligrams per liter. Am I correct?
That's the standard limit that they put in their permit.
But there's an indication by the applicant that they can get down as low as 3 milligrams per liter. They can create a plant like that. In this particular case, best practice would be to get to that 3 milligram, would be to produce nothing, which is not likely to happen. But is it likely that a wastewater treatment plant will produce as little as 3 milligrams per liter?
Most do not.
Why would the applicant indicate that they could do that?
It is possible to achieve low limits. I am not aware of a plant of that scale that does achieve that on a regular basis. There are technologies. So our main treatment facility has achieved 3 milligrams per liter on average for the past 4 years. But it's a larger facility with full-time staff.
Who monitors the inspection process, as you talked about earlier?
You mean for a 10,000?
When the plant's running, how often they clean the grinders, whatever they do?
So they're generally, I don't know what permit the state will issue for this, but in general, the state requires monthly reporting of treatment plant performance. And the state can do an inspection when they want, but they don't generally.
But we don't as a community.
No.
That's too bad. Thank you.
Suzanne? I'm all set for now. Thank you. Scott?
Thank you again, Amy. Appreciate your insight. It's, I guess, fundamentally difficult. We only have 1/3 of the potential build-out to even review at this juncture. So we only have this small kind of optics of what may or may not happen in the complete parcel. Just kind of following your math, so we had at the 10 milligrams per liter and on the 51,000 gallons per day potential discharge, that yielded what you had mentioned, about 714 kilograms, correct?
Yes,
So hopefully they can get down to the 3 milligrams, and that would drop down to about 238. Just stay with me on the math.
Yep.
Structurally, you had mentioned earlier that the first phase would potentially lower the nitrogen levels by about 2,900. Was that correct?
yes,
So in essence, the Saxon development will be impeding that benefit by about 10%. Just rough order of magnitude.
10%.
Because they're
so
going to
it's-
discharge into the system. You're taking 2,900 out. They're
So that's
adding.
actually 20%. Yeah, 25%.
Yeah. So we're spending a lot of money to try and offset the additional impact of what's going to happen here on the project.
Yes,
Okay. And to your point, the conclusion was that the only viable option for the wastewater management from this is an on-site treatment, correct?
yes.
I don't have anything else. Thank you again for
problem.
all of your information.
I hate to be doom and gloom, but worst case, we have a significant uptick in the amount of nitrogen. Their plant is not able to reduce nitrogen as promised. How much money are we talking about that the town is going to have to spend to offset the new load?
I don't know.
Honest answer.
I don't know.
It would be in the millions, I guess, if you follow your math from earlier.
Yes,
That was going to be the next question, but okay,
Tens.
thank you for your candor. Regarding the DEP discharge regulations currently, have they issued regulations that are more strict in terms of groundwater discharge in communities that have sole source aquifers or that are similar to Falmouth that have watersheds that have already been significantly impacted?
I'm not aware of that. So for larger plants, they have imposed, or for some plants like ours, like the town's wastewater facility, they have imposed a lower limit or a lower target. Our plant has a target of 3 milligrams per liter, but it's, I'm not aware of there's not a policy or regulatory change.
Are you aware, is Falmouth, or are you aware of any communities that have imposed more stringent discharge regulations than what the state requires?
Again, we unfortunately don't have jurisdiction in this case. The Board of Health regulates smaller systems that are smaller than 10,000 gallons per day, but we don't have jurisdiction over a plant that size.
Regarding plants that we would have jurisdiction over, are there instances where communities have imposed more stringent regulations? I'm familiar with several smaller private septic plants in town. Do we have more stringent regulations than what DEP at the state level requires?
No.
Thank you. Mark? Thank you for being here.
Heretofore, they've provided us with no
Turn on your mic.
Heretofore, they've provided us with no plans or even an indication of what type of plant they intend on constructing. For that matter, other than a brief reference, no indication on where they locate or plan on locating this. Does that appear out of the ordinary to you?
I don't know about the out of the ordinary. I did see a treatment plant site and a discharge site on the plan, but there was no detail at all about the type of plant or the designs, the sizing of the leach field. I don't know anything about it.
No.
They will have to provide all that information to the state when they apply for a groundwater discharge permit.
What I'm getting at is, one would think that they would already have these plans and they just aren't giving them to us. Is that entirely possible?
I don't know.
There's absolutely no guarantee on this 3 milliliter proposal. To your knowledge, any plants that do hit that number, it's not a consistent, it's a sporadic at best type of situation. And they would tend to operate in a greater range, you know, up and probably including the 10, and be just as likely as not, depending on
Yes,
a
in
busy
general.
season and not because they, you know, kind of rubberneck or whatever to catch up, was my understanding of them anyway. So obviously, what they plan, or what this plant will introduce into the Great Bay, or the watershed there, is going to completely sidetrack our plans. And in order for us to make up for this, would it be unreasonable for someone to estimate that we're going to have to sewer another 300 homes, seeing how there are 300 units here? Would that be as good a guess at this point in time as any?
So math-wise, they are providing some level of treatment. So the properties that we're sewering have just septic systems. So when we sewer those, we are removing, each of those properties is probably discharging more than 30 milligrams per liter. So I would expect we'd have to sewer, if they're meeting their 10, then we'd have to sewer about a third of that number in order to make up for the
So another
additional-
100 homes?
Another 100. That's just a rough.
Rough guess, yeah.
Yep.
And that would be in the tens of millions.
Yes, likely.
Without, and that doesn't consider the potential and perhaps extreme damage that it might do to the newly preserved Coonamessett watershed as well. No one can really speculate. We're just going to have to wait and see. Is that a fair estimation, would you say?
Yes.
That's very nice. What are the chances that the DEP, in light of our efforts to clean this up, would deny them? Close to zero?
Yes, I think it's unlikely, but I don't know. That's up to the DP.
So, going back to my last question, then the damage that this project will do to this town is certainly in the tens of millions of dollars, and perhaps more with any potential damage to the Coonamessett work that's been done over the last 7 or 8 years. It's really not a pretty picture. I don't know what else. Too bad we weren't further along, because this would be a perfect project to show the benefits of urine diversion, I would think. That's all I have for the moment.
Are these private package treatment plants typically operated by the owner, or are they put out to bid and operated by maintenance companies? How do they run them, and how do they maintain them? You mentioned that there'd be a lot of testing, oversight, maintenance, testing, sampling, and so forth. How is that done typically?
It can be done in any number of ways. I believe that the majority of them are run through a contract, because they don't have a developer wouldn't have somebody there full-time who has an operator's license. So the majority of them would have a contract operator.
And these contract operators, would they be engineers, or what kind of company?
They would have on staff certified operators for the level of the plant. So they need a certification equivalent to the level of the plant.
All right, thank you. So I know that you couldn't answer Mr. Morse's question about how much it would cost, and I appreciate that. But going back and following up perhaps a little bit on what Mr. Finneran asked you, you mentioned that we may have to sewer some additional homes as an offset. Can you think of any other activity we may have to undertake as an offset to prevent the further degradation of the Great Pond watershed?
So part of the other parts of that project would be, so when you sewer the properties, you need the collection system in the street, you need a lift station or grinder pumps, and you need additional treatment capacity, and you need additional discharge capacity. It's not just a matter of laying the pipes in the street, it's also a place to treat the wastewater and a place to discharge it. Right now, we do not have, we have very limited capacity in our existing location, and we will have to pursue additional discharge capacity elsewhere, as yet undefined, to handle additional wastewater.
So in other words, if we had to sewer additional homes, we'd be perhaps looking at building another treatment plant someplace.
Or expanding our existing.
All right, thank you.
In the targeted watershed plan, was there any amount of wastewater flow or nitrogen considered for vacant lots?
Yeah, we assumed build out in accordance with the zoning regulation for that area. So whatever the zoning, so I can't.
6.6 houses
Yes,
per acre?
I believe it would be 6 units per acre for that property. Would have been what we'd assumed for nitrogen load for build out.
Okay, plus the house that was there at
Sure.
270. Oh, no, that's a house, that's not vacant. The other thing, for a unit this size, a potential treatment plant this size, do you know if anybody has attempted, it might be better for the applicant, to use deep well injection or a mounding system to inject the groundwater, the wastewater into the groundwater?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any follow-up questions? Tony?
Amy, what part of the state in 2006 issued the total maximum daily load for Great Pond? What part of the state issued that?
So the TMDLs are actually issued by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, but it's the DEP, the state's Department of Environmental Protection, had collaborated with with SMAST to the School of Marine Science and Technology at UMass Dartmouth to prepare the plans that they were based on. So it's EPA and DEP.
Did this come down, I'm reading your letter, it says the state issued. Is that a mandate?
No, it was not at that time. The watershed permit regulations are working towards making that a mandate.
But this is important. If they're not a mandate by the state, why, other than the fact that we care about our water, I mean, any thinking, caring person would care about our water, why is it there? Is it just something the state said, look, you just do this?
Yeah, it's a target, and the state was expecting towns to move in that direction. And the newest regulations, the watershed permit regulations, are the states coming back later to add an enforcement component to that.
So, and I'll be done 2 seconds here. So if one part of the state is issuing this mandate, no, it's not a mandate, but the maximum load, why would another part of the state then allow additional load? I don't understand how one part of the state could issue this and say, you got to cut this nitrogen load down, and then another part of the state would then give them a permit then to increase that load. I don't understand that. How does that happen? Yes, I don't think there's an answer for that. So, why is it that we could not, as a community, as a town, bring in the part of the state that tells us we have to reduce the load, to have a discussion with DEP over this so that they don't increase the load? Are we just chasing our tails, so to speak, here? This is ridiculous that we can't do something about this. Why can't we do something? Is there a way of doing something about bringing both pieces of the state together to make sure this does not go the wrong way? Is there a way of doing that? Do you know of a way?
I do.
Wait a minute.
The comment process for the groundwater discharge permit is the place where we get the opportunity to make those comments.
Are you going to be able to do that? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I will comment on the groundwater discharge permit application.
Thank you very much.
I have a solution, perhaps. How about if we require them to sewer 100 homes around to make up for what they're gonna put in? Not a bad idea.
It's something we talked about, but it is, can the zoning board make that happen?
Well, I don't know, but it's.
Mr. Finneran, you can ask the question of the applicant.
It would certainly offset to a great degree, and actually, because they're still gonna be introducing, maybe it would have to be in the neighborhood of 150 homes. I mean, I'm just doing, but is there a potential we can follow that idea?
Additional sewering would help to offset the load. It is complicated.
Yeah, but if all the septic systems in the neighborhood are releasing, let's say, 15, and they get it down to 5, I mean, if they pick up 150 and build a bigger plant, they certainly have plenty of room out front. You can tell by looking at the map.
So, yeah, the septic systems are likely discharging more than 30. Maybe recently, over time, the county has been collecting more and more data. The effluent from septic is quite high, certainly more than 30 milligrams per liter.
It's not an idea we should dismiss out of hand, then.
It would help. It would be terrific, but it is complicated.
Sorry, they got the money. Thanks.
Any other follow-up?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. George Pucci from KP Law. I just, a couple of preliminary things on it. I just have one question about, before they can apply for the permit, there's a report that they have to prepare, right, and get approved. Can you describe that process a little bit?
So they'll have to prepare a hydrogeological evaluation of their site and provide that to the Department of Environmental Protection for review.
Yeah, and do you have any sense of when that's occurring? I mean, I've had these in other towns that I represent on 40Bs, and typically we'll have a lot more information as part of this ZBA hearing process, even though the ZBA doesn't have jurisdiction over the groundwater discharge permit. Typically, there'll be a lot more information coming out, at this stage than just sort of guessing when that's going to be provided. And can the town comment on that, or do you have any sense of when that report would be submitted to Mass DEP?
I don't know what the project schedule is, and I don't know when they're going to submit that. I would think that in order to prepare plans for this project that are complete, they would need to know what kind of treatment facility they are providing and how big an area they need for their recharge. So I think it'd be difficult to confidently get to this stage without evaluating further.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, just a general comment, and I would recommend allowing the applicant to respond. I feel like the board, I just have to just make this comment by way of advice to the board. I feel like the board members are sort of doing their best to throw darts in the dark and feel their way through this process and not really have information being provided by the applicant so that they can address these questions. What's the applicant's position on that? Why hasn't the board seen the hydrogeology report? What's the status of it? Is the applicant going to put the town into non-compliance, which they don't have the right to do? What's their response to that? What are the mitigation measures that will come up? How would the board condition it appropriately to deal with it versus denying the project based on those types of issues? So, I just, in the hearing sessions that I've attended, and I started to say this last time, that we have very little substantive analysis, being presented, and we're running out of time in the public hearing process. And I want to note it again, that it's unreasonable completely, in my opinion, to put the board in the position that it's guessing on issues like this. You need more information from the applicant on these types of issues. Even if the board doesn't have jurisdiction over the groundwater discharge permit, the board does have jurisdiction over what occurs at this site and what types of waivers are required to build the project. You're not going to be able to provide that type of analysis until you know what's required on the site in terms of site infrastructure and those types of things. So, I just want to call it out again. Your town agent is doing her best to provide you information on it, but obviously she hasn't really been provided any meaningful information on the schedule for the groundwater discharge permit. And this isn't the only issue of a highly technical nature that, you're really kind of shooting in the dark, at this stage in the process. So I just wanted to note that to you generally and just raise that as a concern again and kind of red flag it and see if we can start heading toward more meaningful technical data and analysis on the project. And there's a number of other issues that you have on the agenda tonight, of unanswered questions that are going to take a long time to vet out, in your process. So that's all I have to say on this topic. So I just wanted to note that concern.
No, I think the issue of the waivers, starting at this meeting and most definitely at the next meeting, is to go through and address them all and have the applicant justify or at least speak to the request. But would the applicant care to comment on some of the questions just raised by special counsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Peter Freeman, representing the applicant. And I must say, I have to respectfully, completely disagree with Mr. Pucci. I've done 200 comprehensive permit applications. Most of them don't have the groundwater discharge permit, but many of them have. I have never been involved with a project or heard of one where it is acknowledged that, of course, the town and the zoning board does not have jurisdiction. I have never heard of a situation where an applicant does what Mr. Pucci just called for. We have said from the outset, we did describe how it works. And when we finish this first step, that is the time, sometime after that, when a hydrological study will be done in that report that, as Ms. Lowell described, and I appreciate her description and candor in telling you about what she talked about tonight, but that's when it's done. You are not in any way compromised or at a loss by not being given the purported technical detailed information that Mr. Pucci spoke about, because we have to comply with the state. With every project that I've done, when there is a wastewater discharge permit, that's it. You don't need to make findings about it and get into technical things and have peer review, because it's up to the state. That's all we can do. That's all we can say. There are no questions that we need to answer or can answer, because we will comply with the state standards. And as Ms. Lowell said, there'll be an opportunity for comment and for her or anybody else in the town to comment and to try to work with DEP. That's all there is to it. And I have to leave it at that. There's nothing more that can be said. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Good. Mr. Freeman, I doubt that you or your client really want to degrade our watershed areas. I don't think you really want to do that. No human being would want to do that. But yet this project will do that. All right? So given that we do not have jurisdiction over the wastewater treatment plant, but DEP does, and because this town is very important to the community, the people of this town, to not do more harm than already exists there, is your applicant going to be willing to commit to producing a wastewater treatment plant of 3 milligrams per liter or less? Will they commit right now to this?
Dave can answer, but I would advise that we can't. He said in good faith what is expected.
I'm not interested in good faith.
Ms. Lowell?
No.
But
Mr.
you asked a
Freeman.
question. May I answer the question?
No, you may not. I just want an answer, yes or no, will you commit?
Let the record know.
Just, we'll let it go. Just to your question, one point, okay? We have spent close to 9 months researching, looking at your wastewater, talking with your wastewater department, dealing with some of your bigger problems. As you know, the sand pit was one of your proposed leaching fields if you couldn't go to an offshore pipeline. There were 2 other sites. We talked to the town about that, okay? There's many, many things. Our intent and our requirement is we can't cause harm. DEP is going to spend months going through our wastewater treatment plant, going through how it will be operated, how it will be reported. We're going to be taken to task by the exact same group that Amy answers to. We have to do it. And when we hear what they're doing, and that she gets to, I believe it's like a 30-day rolling average of 3 milligrams per day is your average. But you operate a plant that's at 10 or greater. We're going to try to do far better than that. DEP is going to hold our feet to the fire, and that's what we're going to do. As far as the wastewater treatment process, most developers do not even start that process until they get their zoning relief. DEP often does not want to see you until you have zoning relief. So we're going to go through the process, and one really key point for you to know about is we can't create any more harm. We intend not to. Our site is going to hopefully make the whole area better. We can't do anything that's between us and Great Pond and the Coonamessett. You have failing septic systems all in that area. There's things that can be done. One of the requests of the Board of Selectmen was for us, when we get through this process, to look to see if we could find a way to create more capacity in the future for the town. We're working on that. We're working on all those things. When we first went to the town, one of the solutions that we offered was, we'll take our wastewater line to Brick Kiln Road. We'll pay for it to get up there. That way you can tie in the town, the people around us, reduce the cost, bring that in. We brought that forward.
we also said, when we bring our line up to Brick Kiln, up to the plant, maybe what we could do, while we're digging the hole, put a clean line and bring it back so that you could bring clean water to the gravel pit, so you wouldn't need to use your wastewater over in West Falmouth. We created all those ideas. We met with them. We met with the water quality. You have some of the best scientists in town. We're going to use them. They have great ideas that we can do a wastewater system that will satisfy DEP, and it will be, I hope it's a model system for Cape Cod.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Will you commit to at least no more than 3 milligrams per liter? Will you commit? Is that a yes or no?
Not answering the question.
Mr. Chair, you know what? Can I talk before you?
No, Mr. Pucci, hold on 1 second. We are going to get a DEP permit. I am not making any commitments on the floor of a meeting.
Could I ask one question?
Counsel.
Yeah, many of the issues that you have on the agenda tonight are of this nature, of missing information. And Attorney Freeman is saying, well, they're going to comply with DEP, and that's not good enough. You know, you had your health agent just talk about the fact that there would be an expected degree of planning complete with regard to the proposed on-site septic, okay? And you're going to need answers. Do you have plans related to it? Why haven't they been produced? Have you done the hydrogeology report? Why hasn't it been produced? Who's producing it? If it hasn't been done, when is it going to be done? Who is going to be doing it? I'm only talking again because I want to try to limit the time factor of it just going into speechifying and promises and no analysis or answers to the questions that are being raised. Okay, so you're going to need more information than that. And if that's the way the applicant wants to go, that, okay, that's all the information we're going to provide because we're subject to state permitting requirements, then you're going to have to take that into account when you go to deliberate on how you rule on this project.
Mr. Freeman?
Thank you. 2 or 3 things. The case law is legion that preliminary plans is all you need, and when you don't even have jurisdiction and it's not permitted by the town at all, there's absolutely no need to present that. That's case law, number 1. Number 2, there are also the regulations for 40B in case law that the lack of infrastructure for utilities by a town is not a reason to deny or limit a project. And we could take the position and we reserve all of our rights, that it's the town's obligation to provide sewer to us. The regulations say that that is the situation. Now, we're willing to do the groundwater discharge permit and not try to say, although I reserve my client's rights for the future, given what we're hearing, but we're presenting a proposal where we're not saying the town should extend the sewer at their own cost. In fact, the discussions that Dave just described will happen outside the 40B process, but it might lead to benefit for the town. So just remember that that's the law, the regulations under 40B and the case law, that the town has an obligation to provide necessary utilities. Number 3, when George mentions the agenda for tonight, which is fine, but I'm really just curious because I've been trying for days to find out from your administrator what you wanted to talk about tonight, because we had told you that, we wouldn't have our detailed plans, and so we're here, we're happy to be here. But my understanding was we were asked to see if we could do an overlay plan to show the changes, and we have that if you'd like us to present it. Beyond that, we submitted a letter about the wildlife survey with a detailed letter from Goddard Consultants that explained that we're not agreeing to do a wildlife survey, but with great justification, in our opinion, including a proposal that we would voluntarily agree to a condition that would be essentially the same as what as what Natural Heritage would require if this were a mapped location, which it's not. So we complied with that. The other question that Noreen had mentioned to me was discussion of the types of leases and rents, if you want to talk about that, that's fine. But what are the other items, just so we'll know a few minutes ahead of time?
Can we stick to the one topic that we're talking about? Like, so what's the answer? Is there going to be a hydrogeology report? Who's preparing it, and when's it going to be produced? And
George,
and Mr.
We
Chair, I
already
just
said we're not doing it during these proceedings. No, there's not
So
going to.
you're not going to say when it's going to be prepared?
I already said when it's going to be done, and so did David.
When?
After we get a permit, or if we have to be at Housing Appeals Committee, after that. We already said that. That's the normal process.
And I'm going to just note, just for the record, I don't agree respectfully with Attorney Freeman about the standard. The fact that the applicant has the right to apply for a sewer connection doesn't mean you have to offer it to them or design their project for them. They're proposing an on-site private septic system, okay? That's the proposal. If they want to change that and they want to seek public sewer, then they have to propose that, and you're going to have to vet that, and you're going to have to impose conditions upon that. You don't have to pay to provide something that the infrastructure doesn't exist for. So they need to present a concrete proposal if that's what they're proposing. So it's this false choice of the fact that they can apply for a sewer connection, that they're gracing you with an on-site septic. It doesn't work that way. They make the proposal, and then you vet the proposal. So let's just stop talking in the hypothetical, and let's take them issue by issue and not go on to other issues, because, and I'll tell you, I'll give you a preview, and I'm sorry to be somewhat argumentative. The position of the applicant on the wildlife, the habitat study, in my opinion, is preposterous, and I have a reason for saying that. So I just would recommend we take it topic by topic. Right now, we're talking about the on-site private septic system. I would recommend exhausting the discussion about that while you have your town personnel, here on that. We've heard an answer. They don't intend to do a hydrogeology report before they get a permit decision. They're unwilling to identify who's providing it. You need all this information on the record so that you're going to be closing the hearing soon, and you're going to have to deliberate on a decision.
Mr. Chairman? The points that Mr. Pucci makes are 180 degrees from my experience with KP Law. KP Law in the town of Weston, when it came to wastewater, Alana Quirk, the attorney at the time representing the town of Weston, stopped the ZBA and clearly instructed the ZBA. Wastewater is a permit with DEP. You only have to condition your permit that the applicant will obtain approval from DEP. The ZBA is not to waste their time on the subject. That was the instructions. Glad to produce the video. Glad to bring it to the next hearing if you want. You can watch it yourself. Go on weston.com. Go on Selectmen permitted, but the video's there. My experience is that ZBAs, they want to know one thing: approximate location of the leaching field, approximate location of the plant. That's what we're providing. We have a lot more information. We've been doing a lot more work. We've been going above and beyond the ZBA requirements. We've met with, you can laugh, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, may I just quickly? Mr. Calhoun, you are degrading, your project will degrade our water system. No, don't tell me it won't be, because you're going to build these buildings. You're going to put 52,000 gallons or whatever it is per day into our groundwater, into the system. So just the sheer fact that you're going to build this is going to degrade our It is. Yes, it is. It's going to do that. All right, so let me just finish. We have a right to ask you these questions and to have a better understanding of what your project will do to our water. Neither one of you live in our town, all right? You don't care about what happens to our water. So we have a right to ask these questions. And don't shake your head, Mr. Freeman. Don't shake your head like that, just like you shouldn't be commenting about Suzanne's laughing or anything of that nature. You don't live here.
I commented, sir.
You
I commented.
are degrading our water. We have a right to find out.
Sir,
Thank you.
Sir, there is no proof that anyone is going to degrade your water. You have existing conditions.
How can you say
How can you say that?
Because of the research and the experts and the thoroughness that DEP requires us to go through. You're building a wastewater treatment plant. If I'm not mistaken, clean water can come out of the tap at 10 milligrams, correct, of nitrogen? Drinking water, correct?
That's
Correct?
the
In
groundwater
any
standard.
town.
That's the groundwater standard.
No. It's a different type of standard, but your drinking water can have 10 parts per million, correct, of nitrogen, correct? That's the upper limit. That's what can come out of your faucet. That's what you can drink. That's what you can go out and water your lawn. There's a lot of science and there's a lot of work going on. We will not degrade your water system. We can't. DEP will not allow us to.
And, Mr. Chair,
That would
yes.
be a zero.
You know,
Mr. Chair,
the only
excuse
thing
me.
I can say is that obviously there's a big disagreement. I want to be, and we have to agree to disagree. You can do whatever you like. I say that respectfully. I have the years of experience, and what I said is honest and correct despite any criticism. And so it's very clear that your counsel and myself disagree, and you have to do ultimately what you feel you need to do. And I say that respectfully, and I hope that it would be reciprocal. And that's it. You know, there's no point in belaboring it. It is what it is. Thank you.
And I just want to correct the record. The applicant, I'm assuming, misspoke about KP Law advice. So just to clarify the record and respectfully to the applicant and to Mr. Freeman, Attorney Quirk has not worked at KP Law for many years. The last time that Attorney Quirk did 40B work, she was working with Mr. Freeman, okay? And if we want to play tapes of 40Bs in Weston, I happen to represent Weston.
I know
the
you do.
Zoning Board of Appeals in public hearings on 40Bs and also litigation before the Housing Appeals Committee.
Yes.
And I can tell you that the hydrogeology report was a big part of those proceedings.
It was
And there have
not.
been several notices of project change based on changes that resulted from changes to try to satisfy Mass DEP on the groundwater discharge permit. So don't talk about things that are 8 years old from KP Law and say that I'm saying something that's contrary to KP Law, because, sir, I am KP Law, and I represent those clients that you're talking about.
Mr. Pucci, we can agree to disagree, but if you watch the video, Alana Quirk at the time was counsel to the town of Weston. She was advising the ZBA. I can tell you where she was seated in the hall. I attended the meeting. I had my own project in that town.
Yeah,
And that
I'm
was
aware of it. It's a
your-
matter of public record. These issues that I'm talking about are ongoing in Weston, okay? So whatever Attorney Quirk advised the board 8 years ago has no relevance to these proceedings. And I would just recommend
It has relevance
I just
to-
wanted to correct the record about, these are reasonable questions. When are you going to produce the report? Who's doing it? Your answer is, you're not going to say.
No, we will produce a report when we file with DEP. That is upcoming. We've told the board it was upcoming. We told the board we were working on it. That will be filed with DEP. It will not be filed with the board. It will be filed with DEP.
So we have our wastewater super here. I know that one of our board members is waiting very patiently to ask a follow-up question. Suzanne, are you all set?
I'd like to ask.
Mark, go right ahead.
The applicant mentioned best practices at one point. during our hearings, and you mentioned what was going on at Gillette Stadium and Patriot Place. And in looking at the information on the website here, that they had a 100% reduction in wastewater discharge and a 99% reduction in wastewater discharge to combined sewers. Again, is that anything that you've continued to look at as a possible, project enhancement, or that's not on the table anymore?
We are working on all the ideas that we previously told you about with DEP. They will be ongoing through the process. We're looking at water reuse. We're looking at better technology than even the town's plant. We're looking at the possibility of doing more than we need for ourselves in case the town would like to tie in neighbors. We're looking at the various barrier systems that not only stop any nitrogen from leaving our property, but it potentially catches properties that are upstream of us. We're also looking at the existing conditions in the neighborhood. We're doing a lot more, and we're doing it all, and it will all be reviewed with DEP. But it's going to take time. To get a groundwater discharge permit, it's probably going to take us close to a year.
Through you to council. Having a lack of data that we have and no reports and no hydrology or anything, is that going to affect us doing our waivers that we don't even have an updated list of yet?
It's difficult. It's not the only issue. In a preview, if the process, with regard to the hydrogeology report, so that's going to have to be reviewed and approved or not approved by DEP, and then they go back and forth on that. I can just preview to you, it potentially leads to project changes. Mm-hmm. So then it's sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts. If you end up with too many project changes coming back before you, you don't really know the project that you're vetting. And so, yeah, and I totally agree, the groundwater discharge permit is in the jurisdiction of the state. You don't have jurisdiction over it, but you're trying to vet a substantial project of 300 units in a residential area of single-family homes, and you've got these watershed issues. So you want as much information about the project as you possibly can have, and that's why I'm just asking these basic, simple questions about when is that report going to come out? You need more detail about where, what exactly the system is going to entail so that you can make an informed decision on other issues regarding the project, such as what waivers are required, to build this project as it's being proposed. So, I think we've exhausted the conversation, and I'm just talking about information that comes in before you. The applicant should be desirous of providing as much information to you as possible so that you have as much information as you can to, when the rubber meets the road, to determine what waivers are actually required to approve this project. So that's, and unfortunately, this is the first issue of the night, and we've kind of spent a lot of time on it, but I think you've gotten the answers that are coming from the applicant on that issue.
Okay, thank you.
I did have two questions just regarding things that the wastewater superintendent brought up that could help mitigate nitrogen issues. To the applicant, you've heard that one of the things that would help reduce nitrogen, we could preserve vegetation. Would you be agreeable to a condition to preserve vegetation on the locus?
We are always open to reasonable conditions, but I'm not going to answer one by one. We have to see what the decision is, how many units, which should be what we're applying for, and the totality of the conditions. So I respect your asking the question. I don't take exception to that, but I can't answer piecemeal. We're always, and I always advise clients, that's where we work with the town. Hopefully we would be able to talk to you about draft conditions, which, by the way, Falmouth is one of the few zoning boards where I haven't even been given a draft decision in advance, never mind being able to participate, but on a project like this, I think it would behoove everybody to try to work on conditions in advance, in public. I'm not saying, after the close of the hearing, but that would be my response to any questions like that. Thank you.
That would be the same response then about a condition about fertilizer use.
Sure. I mean, that's a fairly typical condition, but I'm not saying we're committing piece by piece. As you know, that's why you asked it. That's a fairly easy one. But we have to look at them in the totality, that's all.
I just have one comment. You expect us to sit up here and believe that you're going to do no damage, which translates into adding no nitrogen to the watershed. And on the other hand, you don't have the slightest clue what kind of plant you're going to use. So how do you expect us to believe any of it?
Should we talk about site walk dates? I believe these have been proposed by the applicant. Noreen? Are dates, were these proposed by the applicant? Has everyone had a chance to review them? Any ones that don't work for anyone?
Site visit?
Site visit?
I'm okay with all of them.
On the 25th, we already have a meeting at 6. I didn't know if that.
I think that was going to be for a 4 p.m. walk, 3 or 4 p.m.
Yeah.
I can do that.
The 25th, 3 to 4.
We do. It would be in the afternoon.
Okay, fine.
Jerry, does that work for you?
Yes.
Frank?
One other question.
Yep.
To the applicant.
Go ahead.
Probably getting confused between federal and state law, but are you proposing that you'll be best available technology or best practical technology?
What we propose and what we're working for is best available technology, and we believe that we're proposing to try to follow the role of what the town is doing. We're going to get a permit from DEP with what they feel is the acceptable levels to protect.
Good, Jerry? All right, returning to the site, just to confirm, April 25th, that's a Thursday before our regular meeting, between 3 and 4 o'clock, work for everyone?
Yes.
That still work for the applicant? We will schedule that then. Yes. 3.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, you said the zoning board, could a wetlands representative be there? A town employee for the site visit? Or possibly any other town employee that the board may feel?
The zoning board, this meeting would be for the zoning board members. If you want to bring the conservation agent, I don't think there'd be an objection to that. The walk is not open to the general public.
Simply reserved for town employees and board members?
So is this a posted meeting?
Special town employees,
Special town employees.
like us, we're a special town employee.
The ZBA is special town employees, we'd expect the
So is
ZBA.
Yeah,
every
of course,
town
the
meeting.
ZBA conservation agent, if you'd like to either now or have Noreen send to us specific people, I mean, we'd like to know why and who, but of course, it's not a hearing. Whoever comes can only observe. But if you want to send a request for specific other town personnel, just let us know. Thank you.
Are you anticipating anybody wanting to ask anyone else there, Jerry? Or, okay. The question was if Mr. Patamus was expecting to ask anybody else or town-wise on the site visit. So next up, we have a report of the Traffic Committee. Noreen, would you want to give us a little background for the purpose of the audience?
We did receive a copy of the report from the Traffic Committee. Two-page document was forwarded to the board members as well as the applicant. They did express concern about the impact on some particular identified intersections within the town and was looking for potentially some mitigation from the applicant.
Have you had an opportunity to review the submission?
We did review it. I would just remind the board, and this is our view of it, that they are not experts. Two experts, our engineer and your peer review, Vanas and Associates, have put their heads together. We submitted a letter today from Jason Adams, our traffic engineer, going over the most recent March 4th, 2024 Vanas and Associates letter. And I think this was even said at the last hearing, but it seems very clear that the professionals are on the same page and that the traffic issues have been addressed and satisfied. So we don't think there's any reason to go over it. We don't have any response, and we weren't told to bring our traffic engineer tonight anyway, so I'm not going to comment beyond that. We don't think that there needs to be more in traffic. If you feel as though you would like to have our traffic engineer and Vanas at another hearing, certainly that's your prerogative to ask, although we really respectfully think that that's all been taken care of already.
I certainly have some questions for your traffic engineer, and I would expect that you'd make him available to us at a meeting in the near future.
To the chair, your traffic engineer, Vanessa Associates, if you'd like to have our traffic engineer and your traffic engineer back, that's fine, but I believe the two professionals have reached a conclusion. Is there different questions you'd like us to present back to them?
I have numerous questions for your traffic engineer, and I think it's best that he present himself to this board.
We'll bring back. We'd like to have Vanessa here if he's here.
Absolutely.
We'll add it to the agenda.
And if you can, if Mr. Finneran could provide his questions in advance so they could prepare something.
I don't think that's necessary. You provided us precious little in advance, so.
If the board has advanced questions, please submit them through the zoning administrator. Comments from engineering regarding waivers? Looking down to Noreen, moving the agenda along. Noreen? Next thing on the agenda? We have questions about waivers.
Before you get to that, Mr. Chair, did you say on the engineer's report?
I'm sorry?
Did you ask about the engineer's report first, or?
I think the, what, traffic engineer, or the, no, that's it, comments from engineering and waivers, that's the next thing.
Okay.
I'm just confused. Are you saying that that's for the next meeting, which of course is fine, but we didn't receive any engineering report or letter or anything for tonight. So
Yeah, the reason I asked for clarification is I'm assuming that those are the issues that I had raised to Attorney Freeman, or is that a different thing?
No, yes, that's correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the-
yeah, so, no, it's true. We did hear in an email belatedly, but all along, we said, and we still say, We'll have our responses very thorough to those comments and questions from Beals and Thomas for the next hearing. We wanted to complete our plans. It just makes more sense to have a complete set of the revised plans so our engineer can have those in mind when we respond in detail. I mean, there's no issue with that, absolutely. We owe it to you to respond, and we will. It just wasn't on the agenda in our mind for tonight. But absolutely, we'll be ready for that and submit it in advance for April 25th. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Chair, just for the other board members and also the public, so they know what we're talking about, would be between the last hearing session and tonight, I had provided something to the applicant's attorney. Aside from the habitat study, there were a number of issues that were noted in the Beals and Thomas report. You'll recall several hearing sessions ago, Mr. Cody, C-O-T-E, from Beals and Thomas presented to the board with a report February of 2024. And starting on page 7 of that, there's a detailed recitation of waiver issues and points of information and issues that Beals had. And I had recommended a response from the applicant to those issues noted. That would go a long way of starting to, vet the project out. So, I'd recommend probably the best, sounds like we don't have it for tonight, but probably the best way would be for them to superimpose the responses right on to the report, if that's doable. And then the board could have that in advance, and it'd probably help the conversation along. So I'd definitely recommend if the applicant can provide that prior to the next hearing session would be great, because there's an awful lot noted in there that would be very helpful to get the answers to.
So you can have it to us the week of the 25th? The week of, you can have it the week of?
This is the traffic. Yeah, it's transmission. He attaches. The traffic, yeah.
Which developer response to the engineer letter, Noreen? Which letter are we speaking of? I don't have my notes in front of me with this.
So that memo was related to the Beals and Thomas.
Okay.
That was just referenced.
Do we have anything? Oh, she left, all right. We have 3 things under miscellaneous. Site irrigation, in terms of water use and recommendation from the water super. Do we have a comment specifically from our water superintendent, Noreen?
So I was in conversation with the water super, and I did raise the question about site irrigation given the size of this development. And his recommendation was that, if possible, it not use potable water for irrigation. So what we're looking for from the applicant was a commitment about how they would manage that, presumptively using native plants to the extent possible, et cetera, so that we could reduce whatever irrigation would be required, and whether it would be possible to consider collecting rainwater to use for irrigation instead of potable water.
Is that an issue you could be discussing at the next meeting? Regarding lease terms, I guess one of the board is continuously concerned, as well as the town, about the access of affordable housing. In terms of conditions mandating year-long leases, is that something you're prepared to discuss tonight, or?
What has been expressed to us by the town is a goal of long-term leases. You've also ventured into starting to address the town's short-term leases. The affordable units are required to have a 12-month lease. They automatically renew if all the lease requirements are in place. The market rate units, we always go forward with a 12-month lease. There may be situations where we may want to do shorter-term leases, but our tenants, and we are more than happy to entertain a condition that our tenants cannot individually rent out, AKA Airbnb, their units. We can do that. And we can, we're also, one of the requests at the very early on in the process, which we had hoped would be vetted out in a working group, but with the permission of the ZBA, I'm happy to reach out to your housing coordinator, because we were looking for some language from the town on your local preference. Your local preference, especially on the affordable units, is something that you have to work with the state. Obviously, we'll cooperate with you on that. But the preference on the market rate units is something that we told you we'd be happy to look at. And if you're okay with it, I'll reach out to your housing coordinator to try to get what her first cut on those goals are. What was expressed to us when we met with the Affordable Housing Committee was that they weren't looking necessarily for a preference for town employees. They were looking for a preference for people that work in town, whether they work for the town, they work for a restaurant, they work for a tech firm, they work for a bank. They would like to see preference for that, and they'd also like to see if there could be a preference for people that have a tie to the community, whether you have family that already resides here or you're used to live here and you're coming back. So we'll reach out to the housing coordinator with the ZBA. If Maureen would like to also reach out to her, it might help get that moving along and talk to her about that idea.
What is your normal, the shortest term lease that you accept, use?
Me personally?
Oh, they're here on this property, on this.
On any property?
Yeah, I mean, no, what are you planning here? I mean, what's the shortest lease, 6 months?
We would prefer to see the longest lease possible, but in different circumstances, and that's something to talk about. We're finding that when we go to different places, when the community has a heavy educational background or heavy hospital program, that they're often looking for more flexibility in the lease terms. They're looking for the ability to do a 6, a 4, a 9. And that's where you try to carve out conditions that work best for your community.
So you'd never contemplate anything less than 3 months?
Not my experience. No.
Okay.
Did you want to walk us through the changes to the plans that you've submitted this evening?
Bill, you got 2 minutes to walk them through?
Good evening. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates, civil site engineers, professional engineer. I apologize to the board. I don't have my laser pointer, so maybe we'll just use the cursor that Jack's running for me. I apologize also, I wasn't at the last hearing where I know there was a general discussion on the site layout modification. So what's on the screen in front of the board this evening is the overlay that was requested, just to give an indication as to how the plan is taking better shape relative to the feedback received by the board's consulting engineers, town members, and the neighbors. The color plan that's underneath, just to frame what you're seeing, the color plan is our current site plan iteration that was presented to the board back on March 7. With the 5 buildings realigned, as you see. The red outline over top of it is the older site plan, which had the buildings much closer to the property lines. We had the garages flanked around the perimeters. We talked about using those as buffering mechanisms. The plan as it stands today is shrunken into the site and has moved westerly to allow those buffers, those natural vegetated buffers and wildlife strips, wildlife access corridors, whatever the term was that was referenced in the prior hearings, to remain in place as requested by the preference of everybody we heard. Some general numbers just to walk the board through. If we're looking at building 2, which is, Jack, is the building in the upper right corner. Yes, that building there. In the original iteration of the site plan, the corner of that building was 115.5 feet from the northerly property line, which is shown in red. Currently, it's at 195 feet. So we've moved it approximately 80 feet away from that property line. And in there is the preservation of the natural treed area. The same corner of that building to the property line to the east was formerly, 83.3 feet and is now 170.8 feet away. And again, that area is natural vegetation. We have our parking area in there for the cars, for the residents, but we maintain that natural buffer strip that we certified that we'd be able to provide around the edges of the site. Moving to the southeast corner, which is building 4, down the other, right there, the opposite corner, please, Jack, to the right, right there, thank you. Previously, those buildings were off of that southerly property line, almost evenly 96 feet, and now they're 142 feet to the property line. So about 60 of that is the parking field, but the remainder of that is vegetation, is the natural tree line. Now, flanking the space between the parking line and the vegetation to remain on the easterly property line and the southerly property line, you'll note the darkened line of vegetation that we are installing as part of the project. Yes, where the cursor is moving, that's along the south line, and then moving northerly along the east property line. That's supplemented vegetation that we are adding. Evergreen trees, low-growth brush, some junipers for ground cover, some hydrangea, a variety of various plant species, all native, drought-tolerant species sensitive to the avoidance of overwatering. But what we're also doing along that same line is we're installing an earthen berm, constructed about 2.5 feet high. So I don't want to create a hillside persona in everybody's mind, but an earthen berm about 2.5 feet high is just the perfect height to block out headlight glare. We will have vehicles parking along those lines, and with the berm, that headlight glare will be obstructed from leaving the property towards the neighbors along Meredith Drive, and then also the properties to the east. And then the vegetation will serve to also supplement and knock down any light glare, any light trespass that we may want to move horizontally through those zones and preserve the sight lines and the dark sky for the abutters adjacent to us. As we move away from the site itself, which again is by and large the same with the north-south building that's highlighted with the cursor now, and then the 4 buildings flanked in a quadrant style around the courtyard area, that generally remains the same. The parking has realigned around those buildings, but along the north property line, Jack, if you could move to the east with your cursor, keep going, and down just a little bit to the left now. Thank you, right there is fine. That's where we have relocated our dog park. We've relocated our playground. We've added the playground based on feedback received from the board. We've added a maintenance building. That maintenance building will serve multiple purposes, which will include some excess stock for routine maintenance on the site, but it will also provide for indoor bike storage, indoor beach chair storage, indoor kayak storage, variable storage that would be available to the residents here. But those areas of amenities are located, centrally located to our residents, so they're usable, they're accessible, but away from the neighbors to the east of us and to the north of us to make sure some of the sound attenuation that needs to be put in place, dogs barking, things of that nature, is as far away from the property lines as possible, surrounded by all native vegetation. So tree line to remain, underbrush, understory to remain. At the same time, where the cursor is now, we've relocated our trash and recycling center away from any and all abutters. It was formerly in the southeast corner, but we've now moved it to the very northerly portion of the site to make sure that activity center and any noise, any potential odors, any potential light, that is all pulled away from the neighbors on all sides of the site. As the development, the site driveway comes into the property, so if you could just walk the cursor, yes. So the site driveway in this zone where the cursor is looks very similar to previous occurrences, but as you move closer to Sandwich Road, you will notice that we are pulling the roadway away from the property line. Board members may recall we tucked it tight to the northerly property line. We had a retaining wall because of a grade change that was necessary in that area. We have now pulled that away to address the retaining wall, the concerns of the neighbors in that location. It also addresses, and you'll see this in the individual point-by-point response that we are actively preparing. Your town engineer provided comments to us on making sure this roadway met the subdivision standards with minimal needs for waivers, and pulling that away increased those native radii along that curvature of the roadway coming into the site. So we've been able to afford that and embed that into the plans. Along the north side of the entirety of that driveway, it is admittedly very challenging to see based on the lighting in the hall here. We have modified our sidewalk condition, which the board might recall. We had a 6-foot concrete sidewalk located along the sideline of the roadway driveway coming into the site. And we had also intended for shared bike lane access, or the use of sharrows, which allows bicyclists to be in the roadway, sharing the roadway with cars with appropriate signage. Under the plans that are coming back before the board, we have elected to install a dedicated bike lane on the northerly portion of the site driveway. So that bike lane, or let me rephrase that, it's called a multimodal path. So it is not exclusive to bikes. It is shared by pedestrians, it is shared by bicyclists, it is shared by anybody that wants to access the site as a connection from Sandwich Roadway to the development. It is 10 feet wide, and that is based on the requirements of the Complete Streets program that Mass DOT has put forth for bicycle facilities and shared use roadways. And then continuing on our journey out towards Sandwich Road, again, very challenging to see at this scale is obviously the plantings of the divided boulevard. Those have remained. The roadway widths are sufficient for fire department circulation. Those are all still in place. But in this location on the northerly portion of the site, we have integrated in a pull-off from the main roadway to allow for parents bringing their school-age children out to be picked up at Sandwich Road. We've created a sideline pull-off that those cars can be outside of the stream of traffic to not impede flow through this area, not only for residents exiting the site, but also for emergency responders if necessary. So that will afford the opportunity for those parents to pull off, wait with their children, and then let them out when the school bus arrives. If you are not being, waited on by your parents and brought to Sandwich Road, we also have the bus shelter, which will be installed on the northerly side of the roadway underneath the treed canopy that you see there, which will afford a sheltered area for residents to go to while waiting for local service transportation of buses, but also children can wait in a sheltered environment while they're waiting for the school bus. And all of those elements will exist at the entry to Sandwich Road, again, as feedback. Oh, thank you. And as feedback that we heard from the board members. One of the concerns for us, and the architect who's not here this evening will be able to talk more about the architecture, but We are providing a shelter, as you see. It's, you can see through on all sides on the lower levels, and we are doing that intentionally. It is a weather shelter, but we also want to be cognizant that we don't want people residing in there. We want to make sure it's safe. We want to make sure it's secure. We don't want people taking up habitat within there. So we've excuse me, elected not to fully enclose it. We'd rather have it open because that will minimize that, that want for somebody to maybe take up residence in there. These are the entry photographs that we have, the renderings, to give you an indication. The top photograph is the site pointing southerly. You can see the bus shelter. The middle photograph is looking at the site viewing northerly. The bus shelter is in the middle with our divided boulevard roadway. And then another one, the lower photograph is within the site driveway to show the divided boulevard where we have the cut-throughs of our boulevard to allow for motorists to return to their homes after dropping off their children or waiting with their children at the bus shelter. So one thing that we planned into the updated design is we want to ensure that if the parents are taking their children to Sandwich Road to wait for the bus to come in, they are not entering onto Sandwich Road to make a U-turn to come back into the driveway to go back to their unit. Thank you for this. We have accommodated the car turnaround area that those vehicles will immediately turn around within the driveway, not entering Sandwich Road, and allow them to go back to the units after the school bus picks up the children. Thank you for the blow-up, Jack. You might see now more clearly the bus shelter in the top, the sidewalk, the multimodal 10-foot wide sidewalk, bicycle shared use path that will extend the entirety of the driveway, the car pull-off area, which is approximately 60-plus feet wide, which will accommodate 3 to 4 vehicles, depending on the various sizes that are in there. And then the turnaround, which is a cut-through that we've added to the divided boulevard roadway. Previous occurrences of the site plan, that was a continuous strip of landscaping with curbing that we've now isolated that out. So those are the changes that are coming before the board. We are actively working on finalizing these updated site plans with the point-by-point response to all of the comments that we have received on the site engineering. And as Attorney Freeman pointed out, those will be in with the board before the next meeting, well in advance of the next meeting. So I'm happy to entertain and answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I'm happy to defer to you. May I go after you, though?
I have a few questions on locations of where the generators,
Excuse me.
where the generators going to be located.
Certainly. So we don't have the generators located on the site plan. And the reason for that is we have to determine how big the generators are, and those are a component relative to the equipment that's actually located within the wastewater treatment plant building. There will likely be a generator located adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant building, which as of right now is sited to the left. It's right in the nook of the driveway as you're coming into the site. To the left, please, with the cursor, Jack. Keep going left. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Right there. So it is sited at the nook of that roadway as you're coming into the site. The reason for that is where we plan, and we have this on the original site plans that the board has seen, the 51,000 gallons of sewage recharge is located in that general area where the cursor is now. We've tested that soil element. It's compatible with what we need for the leaching fields. So we're siting the wastewater treatment plant building adjacent to that.
And will that be shown on the plan when we have the meeting?
The wastewater treatment plant building?
Generators.
I can certainly add it. What I can do is I can predict the size based on familiarity, but I will be sure to note it that it's subject to final design, but I can certainly add it to the plan.
And what's the fuel?
So the fuel is to be determined. Oftentimes with the generator, we will seek to get a gas line to come into it, so that way we don't need to have diesel storage located on site. But in either case, whether it's the diesel fuel storage or the gasoline, it will be certified and allowed under the fire code. It will be, meaning it'll be coordinated through the fire department as a permit to have that on site if it ends up being the diesel tank. But gas, natural gas is preferred.
And what about mail? How are we handling mail?
That's actually, I'll let David answer the mail question.
Well, I might want to hold
You want to
off, 'cause
hold
I have a
that?
few
I want
other
you,
ones.
we'll hold, we'll do the site questions and then just, sure.
You're going to do a lighting plan?
We already have a lighting plan. There is one in the packages that were submitted. You will, of course, be getting a revised lighting plan
Right.
as the site plan has changed, yes.
And that storage area that you said, like for kayaks and whatever equipment?
Yes.
What's the size of that building going to be?
So we have it at 600 square feet right now. So it's about 20 by 30.
And what do they get, like a room-size locker type thing? Like how do you divvy that up with 300 units?
Right, so there'll be a space planning exercise that will be undertaken as part of the detailed architectural design where a portion of that building will be allocated. And then if they lease space from Saxon for bicycle or kayak storage, they'd be given a key to access the
So
area.
they have to pay to have their bikes?
I don't want to speak to that. I will
Okay.
let Mr. Calhoun
Okay.
answer whether there is a fee
All right.
associated with that. But if given access to it, it would be keyed access.
And where is snow storage? You will show that on the plan too?
Yes, ma'am.
On the new
So
plan?
snow storage is noted on the application materials that are already in front of the board. It is, of course, revised to align with this current iteration of the plan. So what we endeavor to do for snow storage is, I know it seems less desirous to have long, straight runs of parking. Everybody would love to break those up with a lot of landscaping and a lot of maybe curvilinear geometry, but as part of New England maintenance for snow plowing, long and straight really works the best. So we seek to have very long, straight runs around these buildings, and snow storage is targeted to the westerly portion of the development, as you see, and on the northerly portion of what you're seeing on the site plan in front of you. The addition of the landscaping hedge, the supplemented landscaping, and the berm that I referenced will preclude us from putting snow storage on the east and the southerly portions of the site.
But you will show that on the plan that we get?
Yes, ma'am.
And then my final one is how are you tackling the Amazon, the deliveries, all the deliveries that are going to be nonstop?
Do you want to? I'll let David handle that.
Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
The normal practice for your mail facility is to have a mail room in the amenity space. And it includes not only mailboxes, so there's a central delivery place. We also will have a package delivery room. So Amazon will not be going door to door, nor will any of the other delivery companies. They have to come to the amenity space.
Is that the clubhouse? Is
Yes.
that what you're talking about?
Yep.
So anytime you get your mail, is there going to be extra parking in front of this clubhouse for these people running in to get there?
There's plenty of parking around the amenity space in the amenity area. The mail room and the package room actually becomes typically a hub for the neighborhood. And people often, that's why we build such a large amenity space, because in addition to package storage, food delivery places, mail room, we'll be putting in a dog washing facility. We'll be putting in each of the buildings.
Dog walking. Okay.
A dog washing
I
facility.
thought he said watching.
Yeah.
Washing.
If you go in a modern apartment building right now in the amenity space, and you happen to be walking down the hall and you look, you'll think you're looking at a sauna / a place for people to hang out. It's actually a dog wash facility, and they're very, very well done, they're very well used, and they're well received. So that will be in the amenity space. But one of the points that was raised to us, Noreen brought to our attention, was a question about additional bike storage. So not only will we have it in the bike barn / service building, we also will have bike storage in the individual apartment buildings. So each building will have a dedicated space on the first floor as well as outside.
And are you charging?
For the bike storage? No. For the, chairs and the kayaks and things, there may be a nominal charge for that.
What about unregistered cars?
Not allowed on the property. Boats are not allowed on the property. Trailers are not allowed on the property.
That's all I
Tony?
have. Thank you.
It appears from, I don't think this plan was shown, it's online at the ZBA office, indicates that there's now a 10-foot landscape buffer zone and a 50-foot natural buffer zone to the Meredith Road side, am I correct?
Could you say again, please? I'm sorry.
On the Meredith Road side, the southern side,
Yes.
right along there. Now, right now, you've now created a 10-foot to be planted landscape area plus a 50-foot natural buffer along there, so we have 60 feet of buffer primarily.
Yes, yes.
On the revised landscape plans that have to do with the 10-foot planting area or any place else, you'll be identifying each species and the size that will be planted versus instead of someone getting a 1-foot-high rhododendron or something like that?
Yes, yes,
All right, so that'll all be noted on the plan.
yes.
And with regard, two quick things. With regard to, tell me, which building is number 1 and number 2? Just put the pointer on it for a minute. I can't see it on this plan here. In the north, so the buildings to the north.
Right, so the north-south building is what I refer to when I say building 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 as you go clockwise around the site.
So is there, and I appreciate you overlaying the old plan, the original plan over that. Is there any reason why we can't take all 4 buildings and move them just a slight bit further north? You've got a lot of parking area to the north that's in the new plan. Again, this is what was online versus what was brought here. Can you move those buildings a little bit further to create a larger buffer zone along the south side?
So forgive me, I don't know what you're holding in terms of what was available online. Hopefully it aligns with what I'm sharing with you.
It does.
Okay, okay, good. So we studied buffering on the north, buffering on the south, buffering to the east, based on the feedback that, we obviously heard from the board, we heard from the neighbors. In order to make sure we have adequate parking area, adequate room for the amenity package, adequate room for the dumpsters, and all of the infrastructure-based activities, we really needed to keep the site sort of located as it is. We maximized the buffer on the south side as much as we could. But there's just some area we need to preserve on the north side for the infrastructure things that we need to do to work the site, quite frankly.
Now, you had talked about the road being a straight line for snow plowing and all of that. That's the best thing. Why not just take the road straight through the middle?
So, yep. Yeah. So it's an excellent question. So there are a couple of things that are in play, obviously. We have the easement that you can see that runs through the site, that there are utility poles that run through that easement that we want to avoid. So straight down the middle isn't necessarily straight down the middle. It might appear, but it might be off to one side or the other. So by moving it tight and northerly to the property line, we can minimize the crossing that goes through the easement area. That's number 1. Number 2, which I laid out, we tested the soils between the site driveway and the easement itself, which we are targeting for the wastewater leaching field. While the wastewater leaching fields can exist under pavement, and portions of them may exist under pavement here, it is better for long-term maintenance if they ever need to be excavated, removed, and or replaced to not be under the hardscape.
Thank you very much for that. One last question. We have been told that we cannot consider the western parcel or the northern parcel in our deliberations because the application is only on the 13-acre parcel where you've shown in the plan. Yet you're utilizing the western parcel to access what you're showing on the plan there. Why is it, and I guess this may be a legal question rather than an engineering question, why is it we cannot consider in our deliberations the western parcel that's right now open in how we come to our conclusions and our decisions on this. I mean, even if it's not part of the application, it is part of the application because we have to consider the road going in. So I think that opens us up to actually considering what happens on that western parcel. Now, I know that's a legal question, Mr. Freeman, and you're sitting there, but you may not even answer it, or Mr. Calhoun. But you're utilizing the western parcel. Why aren't we considering that in our deliberations?
So, sir, you said it best. It is a legal question, so I won't answer that as an engineer.
I am going to ask our special counsel to address that, maybe not tonight, I don't want to hold up everyone else, but I think that is a question that our special counsel has to help us work on, because you are utilizing that parcel that you say we cannot consider in our deliberations. I will then, that's the end of my questions on that.
Scott?
Mr. Chair, just on that issue, another preview, I would anticipate I'm going to have a disagreement with my good friend Attorney Freeman on that issue. I do find it relevant and within the board's purview. And the only reason I interjected is, the next agenda, the next hearing you do have anticipated the applicant's response to the Beals and Thomas report. Beals and Thomas specifically noted that issue. They noted a concern over that about how basically, I'm going to paraphrase it in a colloquial way, you could come up with a much better project if you use all the land, available. And they did raise the issue. Why don't we let the applicant respond to that before we get into the disagreement about, the scope of your review? It is raised in that issue, in that report. And the other place that's raised very early on, Cape Cod Commission commented on the project, and they noted the need for rental housing on the Cape. They were very clear about that, but they were also very clear about how this site should be used for development, and they recommended very clearly that disturbed areas be used to the greatest extent possible, and wooded areas, natural resources be avoided to the greatest extent possible. So, in answer to that board members' questions, in my opinion, the site as a whole is very relevant. And it's also relevant when you're considering the need for waivers with regard to constructing this proposed project. Are waivers really necessary if you look at greater project areas than this one proposed building envelope? So it's relevant on that issue as well.
i.e. a height waiver?
Height waiver, right. One of them.
I'll scratch that off here then.
No, just from a timing perspective, I know you're committed to get the plan back to us at least a week in advance. So again, the sooner the better, quite honestly. Obviously, it'll be far more detailed than what we've gone through this evening. So setbacks are critical so we can better understand them. Even any additional color that you could add to comments like your 2.5-foot berm, why not 3? If that's an industry standard, things like that. That could just, again, help us to kind of digest the facts that you're going to give us on that short period. So we'll have better questions for you when we get back together on the 25th.
Sure.
Mark?
On this, in the north and south, on the bottom, there's 7 of these rectangles, and there appear to be 8 on the top. Are those drainage structures?
Forgive me, sir, I'm not sure what you're seeing.
Between the trees and the property line, there are a series of rectangles.
I believe those used to be the garages.
May I?
Oh, those are the outlines of...
I just want to be sure for you.
There, on the bottom and the top.
Yes. Yes. So what you're referring, they were the former location of the garages.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't have much here. That bus structure, the bus shelter?
Shelter.
What's the height to the bottom of the roof line there?
Would you know offhand? I don't know, sir. We can find out. I'll confirm that, for you, but I don't know offhand.
How wide is that thing?
We have it, that I might know, if you bear with me for just a
Not
moment.
the length, the width.
No, I don't have that either, sir, but I will verify. I will get answers from both of
Well,
those.
my point is,
Yes.
if young children are waiting in there, it appears to be inordinately high and kind of narrow, and it looks like the wind would blow the rain from one side to the other, and it would do them almost nothing on a bad day to keep a young child dry and warm. You know, your idea of keeping the thing high to keep people from occupying it, and I completely understand that because there are bus shelters around town that, actually, they tore one down in a particular location because it did become a hangout. It had a particular nickname. But I think that, considering young children are going to be in there on a rainy day with the wind blowing, that's going to do nothing for them. The wind's going to blow right through it. And then, that's, I guess, about it. The dog wash thing was quite interesting. I was sure that'll be popular.
Sir, if
Is
I
that where
may,
Peter gets his hair done?
we do a number of projects of this size, and the amenities for pets, it's the number one thing.
Anything else?
No, that's good.
Frank?
Well, I just don't really have any questions, but kind of a comment that by putting the buildings where you've put them and kind of close them up, the place looks really kind of congested to me. I think you had a little bit more open concept before. I know what you're trying to do, but just make a comment. Also, I was wondering, you said you have this facility for storing kayaks and bicycles and all kinds of things. To me, that appears to be inadequate. And how would it be distributed? First come, first served? And then if you're giving everybody the key to the place, people are going to be taking other people's bicycles. This doesn't sound to me like a very well thought out plan.
Our marketing team will look at the size of the barn, if you want to call it that. If you go and tour other properties, we'll most likely oversize it. It'll be bigger than required. But again, it becomes a place that the people that live there, they enjoy it. And if somebody really is a biker, they want the different bike storage. They want something that's secure, different. And if it is different than what's provided in each building, then it is something that they can pay or not pay, depending upon the facility. It'll be determined later on in the process. It's not something that we're going to figure out right now. But it will be oversized.
Well, thank you for that comment, Mr. Calhoun, but I guess just back to my original comment about it being kind of congested, it looks to me, I just think for a better project, you might stretch it out a little bit and use some of that land to the west. I think that's just a personal comment.
Jerry? No question. Any follow-up questions? Doreen?
So I have one for the engineer while he's close to the podium. With that U-turn option for the parents that are driving back into the development, is there enough width there so that cars that are just coming into the development from Sandwich Road won't collide with somebody making that U-turn? Is there sufficient width there?
Yes. So we looked at it from a perspective of the minimum dimensions necessary for a vehicle to make a full U-turn through there, and it's adequately sized as dimensioned on the plan. Obviously our intent is motorists, I'm going to bite my tongue when I say this, but they do need to take a personal responsibility as cars are coming in to make that U-turn. Accidents do happen, but the geometry is sufficient that it's adequate.
You've got a turn-off area of about 86.4 feet, excuse me, 86 feet 4 inches, excuse me. You're going to lose some feet based on the 45-degree cutouts. Approximately how many vehicles are going to be able to stage there?
So as I mentioned, so a parking space is 18 feet is what we use. So at 88 feet, I think I said 60 earlier, I apologize for that error. So roughly 4 to 5 vehicles dependent on the actual vehicles that are using it. You know, it's not our intent to allow every parent to bring the child up there, but we wanted to make some accommodations for those that would want to do that.
You might want to consider increasing that depending on if you get young people. If you've ever seen the school during entrance or dismissal time, it's a lot more than 4 or 5 cars.
Understood. It's something we can take a look at if that's a necessary consideration.
Any other follow-up questions? Yes, no? All right. We open this up to public comment. Nope.
Mr. Chair, before you get to public comment, did we pass over the wildlife study issue, or were we going to include that?
I think the answer was no from the applicant.
So can I speak to that?
Certainly.
And I'll speak briefly, and then I'm going to stop talking for the night unless you ask me to. But this is an important issue because it's seasonal. And I don't need it. I reviewed Attorney Freeman's letter. I reviewed Mr. Goddard's letter. And please, I'm not looking for applause. I'm raising an issue in good faith on behalf of the board and my advice to the board. And this goes to that issue of the more information that the board has, the board is in a better position to, number one, address whether this project should be approved or denied, and if approved, what conditions would be appropriate and what waivers would be appropriate. As we addressed at the last hearing session, I suggested, and the applicant was very responsive to it, and they did it right away, I suggested that the applicant confer with Mr. Goddard, who's highly qualified in this area for habitat issues, natural resources, and that they confer with him and get a proposed scope for a habitat study on the site, and that he respond to them, and then they give an answer as to whether they would permit that habitat study to go forward and what the scope of that would be. Mr. Goddard returned, and his letter speaks for itself. He set out a very reasonable and, in my opinion, entirely adequate habitat study, a proposed scope, and he was specific about the season that could occur. He talked about a 3-week period between April and September. He set out the scope of what that would be. Then part 2 of his letter talked about if habitat specific to turtles was revealed in that study, then what the process would be for natural heritage on that. But in refusing the wildlife study, the applicant's counsel kind of skipped over the first part of what the scope of the habitat study would be, and then it leaped to providing a proposed condition for turtle habitat, turtle protection, when it came time to construct the project. But the applicant didn't address the fact that Mr. Goddard set out a very reasonable and adequate scope of a proposed habitat study on that site. And that would be information that's highly relevant to the board when trying to condition this project. And the last thing I'll have to say about it is, we're not only talking about turtles, first of all, and we're also not talking about only an issue that the abutters have raised, trying to stop the project. That's, I think, the implication from the applicant's position on this, is that that was just another issue raised to try to stop the project. But again, Cape Cod Commission commented on this very early on. Before the abutters said anything about it, they recommended in their initial review of this, and again, recognizing the need for housing on the Cape and supporting that, that a habitat study and a natural resources study should be conducted on this site. And they recommended that very early on, and Mr. Goddard set forth a adequate scope of how that could occur, and it can be information that you would then use in trying to decide what to do on the project. So I'll just raise, in good faith, I would ask on behalf of the board, respectfully, that the applicant reconsider their position on Mr. Goddard's proposed wildlife study and go ahead and agree to that study in accordance with the scope that's set out in his letter. And that would be my recommendation to the board, to ask of the applicant, and my respectful request of the applicant to reconsider their position on that, and please go forward and authorize that habitat study to go forward. It would be very helpful to this process, and it would also show a lot of good faith. If we're talking about a project that's going to be built in Falmouth of this size and scope, and the issues that are involved with regard to natural resources, it would go a long way to show cooperation with information that the board needs and that the town overall needs for this very substantial project. So I would just ask, between now and the next hearing session, that the applicant reconsider that and provide a, hopefully a positive response to the proposed wildlife study.
Would you like to address the request now or at the next meeting? Public comment. If we just ask this time, we'll do things a little differently just to save a little time, but you just want to queue up in line right down here. If you need to sit, then please sit.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Dennis Murphy. I'm an attorney with Hill Law in Boston. I've been retained by some of the neighbors in connection with this project. I was here a few weeks ago, maybe it's a couple of months now, and I didn't make a presentation at that time because Mr. Calhoun said he was going to be proposing a new project. I see that's still in play, but I did want to make a few comments. I sat in your position for a decade in my own town, which is how I came to be a 40B lawyer. I've now dealt with quite a few 40Bs. And my first point is that I don't think you have enough information to make an informed judgment about this project, about waivers, about conditions. Your own peer review engineer, Mr. Cody, who's not here, one of the first things he recommended in his February 5th letter is that they not be allowed to segment the project. There is a concept in environmental law about anti-segmentation. This property is under single ownership, and as Mr. Tony, I didn't get your last name, and without my glasses, I can't read your. As you pointed out, the access is through the western part of the parcel. It blew my mind that they're even talking about the possibility of leach fields within the pavement when you've got 30 acres of vacant land. You heard from the Cape Cod Commission, who know a thing or two about site plan review and development, that the way to address a site like this is to put the development part where there's already disturbance. One of the commenters has said that the 30-acre woodland that sits there is worth 60 kilograms per year of nitrogen as standing timber, as opposed to cutting it all down. So I think you need a lot more information about the wastewater, about the plans for the other side of the property. And what I will say, take your advice from Attorney Pucci, who knows 40B as well as anyone in this room. But you have to decide the project that's put in front of you. They control the application, meaning you might want to suggest this, that, or the other thing, but they control how they choose to propose this. The flip side of that is you control whatever permit they get or don't get. And that brings me up to my second point. Everything that I've heard and read online cuts against their project. I haven't heard a good argument yet for the way it's been proposed at the density and the height and all of that. The clear cutting, the impacts to the Coonamessett River, that really drives me insane as an environmental attorney. The fact that $8.5 million has been spent to take nitrogen and phosphorus out of that watershed, that this would put right back in, and that the town of Falmouth, have the legal obligation to impose offsets that would require you to maybe bond, maybe borrow money, maybe do other infrastructure projects to do more sewering within Falmouth. So that gets me to my third point, which is I have some very concrete, what I hope are concrete suggestions on how you can get additional information. You haven't really gotten a response to your peer review report yet, but one of the things your peer reviewer has told you is not to issue a blanket waiver. I agree with that. Blanket waivers are a blank check. You don't want to do that. Two of the things that they've asked for blanket waivers from are actually environmental impact assessments. So this project happens to be within the Coastal Pond Overlay District. And you don't have to, I can send you a letter, or you can refer back to Mr. Cody's report. I'm going to give you the citation if you want to look it up. But in that district, there is a requirement to do a development impact analysis. Don't waive it, make them do it. A second requirement is an environmental impact statement, which is part of section 305.14. Again, that's another tool that's already built into your own code and regulations that would require, that they've asked for a waiver for, that would require them to do an assessment. So I highly recommend that you do those. Attorney Pucci told you earlier tonight you shouldn't have to guess, and I couldn't agree more. Right now, it feels like you're trying to make a ballpark judgment, and that's not what 40B really wants. 40B really wants you as members of the zoning board to make an informed decision about what's best for Falmouth. And part of the disconnect here is that the applicant is interested in maximizing the investment on their return for their investors. Your interest, I think, is to protect the town of Falmouth and balance the need for housing against protection of the town's resources, including things like nitrogen in the watershed and the protection of the river. So what I saw the engineer propose tonight that hasn't been fully engineered, to me, it's little changes. It's not moving the needle. Now, maybe you feel differently, but I'm not persuaded. I don't think they've made their case, and I hope to have another opportunity when we actually do get some data and some science to try to provide more analysis and evaluation for the board's benefit. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm Tommy Zine, 36 Captain Bonenberger Lane. I have about 5 points I need to discuss, about 3 minutes. Thank you. I provided a handout before the meeting to the board. It's this handout here. FCTV asked me to hold this map. Right about there. I want to follow up with what we talked about in our last ZBA meeting. Here's a map of the 30-acre parcel and gravel pit. The red dots are testimonials of the eastern box turtle sightings. They span several decades. The state reporting site for these turtles is not user-friendly and difficult to document each sighting. I've reached out to Mike Jones from Natural Heritage and discussed this issue. This map is based on only 15 homes. There's a couple dozen turtle sightings, and I'm sure there's more. My second point I want to talk about. Safe harbor, our 10% goal, and what it means. Our 10% goal is calculated using information from the census. The 10% is based on the number of homes, not the number of people. There's a misconception that Saxon's 300 apartments will get us to our 10% goal. And then it's over, we're all done. That's not an accurate statement because the 10% is a moving target and is recalculated with every census. By the 2030 census, more homes will be built, causing Falmouth to drop below the 10% threshold. Then developers like Saxon Partners would be able to apply again to mass housing. This falls in line with Mr. Calhoun's statement that they like to hold on to land for future development, which leads me to my third point. Mr. Chairman and board members, please consider this request. Deny all waivers with reasons and not condition it because we don't have enough information from Saxon Partners. Just consider it. Number 4, I want to point out Mr. Calhoun's position on the nitrogen impact on the Coonamessett River from this project. In 2023, he acknowledged it could be 10 years before the nitrogen reaches the Coonamessett River. Mr. Calhoun is not a scientist and can't predict it won't happen sooner. And once it does, Falmouth will take a huge step backwards, especially after listening to wastewater superintendent Amy Lowell. Number 5, and this is for everyone. The family who are the sellers, remember, we are not against them. They are Falmouth too. They deserve to sell their land and be made whole, but not by Saxon Partners. I'll end with this. Do you know what makes this town special, besides its villages and rich history? It's the people. It's all of us. We help to make it special because of the mutual respect we show each other every day. Sadly, Saxon's project has tried to divide us. I see it, and we can't let this happen. Remember, moving forward, let's all stand together, respect each other, and stop Saxon Partners. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm Chris Neal. I live at Marvin Circle in Falmouth. And I've been studying nitrogen on Cape Cod and around Buzzards Bay for many, many years, and I have a PhD in the dynamics of nitrogen in the environment. And I just want to say to the board that the claim that more nitrogen released from this project will do no damage to the Coonamessett River and Great Pond is just nonsense. You know, we know that there's going to be an eclipse on Monday, and we know that additional nitrogen going into Great Pond will damage and further degrade the estuary. So your purview, you have the purview to look at this in terms of environmental impact and damage. But you can't assess that damage. Nitrogen is a huge environmental impact of this project. You don't have the information to assess it if they don't describe what their treatment of nitrogen is, and you can't calculate how much nitrogen is going in. So I would urge you, if they do not provide that information, you should decline this application. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Ralph Herbst, Precinct 8. I'm not going to talk about nitrogen. I'm going to refer to 2 documents that this town uses to plan and move forward. The first one is the Local Comprehensive Plan. That was developed by the planning board, of which I was a member at the time, in 2016. It has 13 elements. One of the elements is housing. That was 8 years ago, and it's proved to be very effective. I would like to quote something out of the Local Comprehensive Plan, which, by the way, is approved by town meeting. So the town, all of us, agreed to this plan. On page 23, It says, adequate and diverse housing is inextricably bound to the economic health and diversity of the community. This project is the opposite of diverse. Thank you. We did not invite this applicant to our town to help us with affordable housing. They came here for only one purpose: to make money. Our town is fortunate to have you 7 people up here representing 30,000 people to examine and study applicants such as this. So we have a lot of faith in you, and we know you're paying attention. The other document that I would like to refer to is one that was just recently produced. It's called the Housing Production Plan, which was produced by a contractor well known on the Cape called Horsley and Witten Group. The Housing Production Plan talks about developments such as this. And under the goals and strategies of this report, which was paid for by the town to study our housing issues, I would like to quote on the executive summary, which I highly recommend you read because the other one is like 80 pages long. The executive summary is quite concise and to the point. It says in 2 different places, promote a diversity of housing types targeting different housing needs. This is, again, the opposite of diversity. This is taking all of the eggs and put them in one basket, which is not the way we do things in our town. The way we deal with affordable housing in our town is by spreading it around. We don't lump it all in one big group of high-rises and just walk away. That's not the way we do it in Falmouth. I'd like to remind the applicant that we have 3 entities in our town that deal with affordable housing. Homegrown stuff. No other town on Falmouth, on Cape Cod, has what we have the luxury of having. We have the Falmouth Housing Trust. We have the Falmouth Housing Corporation, and we also have Habitat for Humanity. We do it our way. We don't want people coming into our town telling us how to do it because we know how to do it already. I would like to quote one more thing in the affordable housing plan. Also in the executive summary on page 5. It says, under the goals and strategies of how to achieve affordable housing, it says, minimize greenfield development. That basically means you don't cut down a lot of trees. By targeting residential development and redevelopment where it already exists. This is out on Sandwich Road, almost as far as you can get from the center of town, and unfortunately, which has always already been spoken to, is not on the sewer. So this proposal by the applicant basically is something that we don't want. I have lived in this town for over 30 years. I know a lot of people in this town, a lot of people in many different organizations and venues. I haven't met one person out of the 30,000 people that are here, that live here, or probably at least 1,000 of them whom I know, that thinks this is a project that belongs in Falmouth. The applicant should take this project and go to another town and see if they can jam it down their throat.
Good evening. Matthew Hanley from Thomas Landers Road. I've been following this project. I was actually asked to look into this and to give my point of view as a project manager. I've been looking at this project, and I've actually reviewed some of the plans, at least the preliminary plans. And I feel that the developer is hiding behind the 40B and affordable housing aspect of this. When in all actuality, if you look at their presentation that was submitted to the board, it's actually being marketed as a luxury destination. And if you read between the lines, you see with the concierge service and, we can put your paddleboard and your bikes, the amenities that they're advertising, it's not for affordable housing. This is for a luxury destination. So if this housing project moves forward, we're going to bring 300 more units, which is like 750 more people to Falmouth. This isn't going to benefit Falmouth. If the developer gets up here and says, we're going to prioritize the housing for Falmouth, like there's people living in their cars in the Falmouth Mall that work at TJ Maxx and Shaw's and Walmart, because they can't afford to live here in Falmouth. They can't afford a house. Now, if this developer says, hey, we're going to prioritize the Falmouth housing rolls, all those people on the list, they're going to get first hit at these dwellings, hey, that's going to do some improvement. But that's not what they're saying. They say we reserve the right. We reserve the right to do this. And then also, we're not being given information on purpose. Because the information, if you put the sewage treatment plant on this plan, or you put the full scope of this project, it would be so unsavory, there would be a public uproar, and it would never be allowed in town. So they're spoon-feeding us this drawing, saying, oh, we're not going to tell you what we're doing with the other pieces. No other group in this town, if you wanted to build a house in Falmouth and you went in front of this board and said, I'm not going to tell you where I'm going to put the septic system, or I'm not going to tell you how big my driveway is going to be, this developer is hiding behind the political system and its deficiencies. This should not be allowed. And in fact, they actually flaunt it and say, that's outside your jurisdiction. Well, you know what? I've also been reading up on what they have to do. They're going in front of the Affordable Housing Fund. Now, the Affordable Housing Fund gives them subsidies and potentially give them loans to build this project. Well, I recommend that this board makes a very detailed report about all the deficiencies and all the questions that we have, and we submit it to Affordable Housing Fund and to Mass DEP, and then we send representatives to Mass DEP to these hearings. And I also recommend that any of the butters go to the Mass DEP hearings and ask those questions at a public hearing. I know they're going to be off Cape, and that's what they're counting on, is that people aren't going to take their time off work to go up to a hearing. I tell you, I do it. And you know what? This project should be held to the same standards the town of Falmouth's being held to. If the town of Falmouth's new discharge site has an impact of excess nitrogen in West Falmouth watershed, the town of Falmouth has signed an agreement with the Mass DEP for a nitrogen offsite plan. So if our plant doesn't perform to the standards that Mass DEP lays out, the town of Falmouth is going to have to pay for septic systems to take up that extra nitrogen for the deficiency from their performance from their plant. This board can put that in there, that we want that in there. If this plant does not perform, or if their calculations for this impervious surface area doesn't perform, you know, then they have to be held accountable. Because the taxpayers of Falmouth, if we're being negatively impacted about this, and it's coming back on our tax dollars, how is that making Falmouth a more affordable place to live? It's not. It's already unaffordable to live here. I buy groceries, I pay my taxes, fuel, everything. Now, if this project negatively impacts Falmouth, it's not making it a more affordable place to live. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. My name is David Craig. I live on Striper Lane in East Falmouth. Been in town about 25 years. I have three concerns. First is the impact on Great Pond and the Coonamessett River. We've heard all night about the nitrogen. The statistic of 714 kilograms a day from 51,000 gallons of wastewater equates to 1,574 pounds, about 3/4 of a ton, what you'd put in the back of a pickup truck. It's that immense amount of nitrogen. And after we spent millions and millions cleaning up the Coonamessett River, it's just insane to think that this project would not have any impact on the quality of the water. That's one. Two, cars, 300 units, average 1.75 cars per thing, about 450 cars, double the number of trips up and down Sandwich Road every day, an insane amount of traffic coming down. Nice that they're going to have the place for the park for the kids, but the cars will go to town. They'll go to the Stop and Shop, they'll go to the center of town, they'll go to Route 28. Very few will head north on Sandwich Road. So big impact on the center of town. Third thing is the impact on the neighbors. The people who bought houses on Meredith Drive, on Pitch Pine Lane, Harris Hill Road, those are nice neighborhoods. They bought those houses with the expectation that it was relatively country and not a lot of neighbors on top of each other. Now they're faced with these monolith buildings, 3 stories tall, 100-foot tall roofs right behind them. And they have the right to have peace and quiet and enjoy their investment, which are negatively impacted by 300 units, the cars, the dogs, all the rest of that. So for those people, 300 today, but since there's open land, which the developer will not commit to any use of how that will be in the future, 300 today, 300 in 5 years, 300 in another 5 years. So we're looking at a 900-unit development. And for Attorney Freeman to say that there's no traffic impact, I find that disingenuous. Thank you very much.
Good evening. This decision to allow this 40B to go through must be stopped. And for the love of God, if you're for this, take a walk and go to the Coonamessett River. Whether or not we have different political views, if you're for or against these views, I ask you to walk the Coonamessett River restoration area. On your nature walk, you will discover indigenous flowers, insects, eastern box turtles, rabbits, bats, bees, birds, owls, osprey, hawks, blue heron, eagles, foxes, coyotes, deer, and many, many more. Most especially, you'll find ladders for the herring to swim up the herring run. And you'll see the alewife herring on the ladder swimming to their special spot to spawn. Many may not know this, but they travel to the same spot annually and are a critical source of food for larger fish species. Just think, if we have no more herring, no more fish and chips. And there's a lovely lady in the back of this auditorium that makes some really good ones at her local restaurant. So you got to have a bit of humor, but seriously, it's true. It would substantially degrade our local fish population that feed on the herring. So what that also degrades is the fresh fish seafood being served in our locally owned businesses that people come here for. Owners, cooks, and servers would be impacted. How will this huge complex continue to ripple the nasty side effects for years to come? No one has mentioned, and this is upsetting to me, directly across the street from 375 Sandwich Road is Mare's Pond Well. It is a drinking water source per the town of Falmouth current website as of today states that it is part of our water source, as well as Jenkins Pond, one of the cleanest ponds on Cape Cod. There are eagles that are on that pond. I have witnessed this with my own eyes, and that water has been repeatedly tested by the ATPCC, Association to Preserve Cape Cod. These tests help to ensure it stays the cleanest pond on Cape Cod, plus the negative impact this would have, never mind, on Great Pond. I truly hope and pray the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe gets seriously involved to stop this. This giant complex will be on the hands and hearts of those who approve it. Ask yourself if there was a massive fire in this complex. Think about a fire. Do we have the proper apparatus and equipment to stop it? Do we have the proper pipes and water infrastructure to stop it? Do we have the manpower to stop it? What happens if they sell it? Whose fancy housing project is this now? Will our taxes have to pay for all this infrastructure? Will the schools and bus routes need to be built or redistricted? If you could kindly put up the picture that you just took off, if you're able to. The bus turnaround loop. I live on Deepwood Drive. I worked at Mullen Hall for years. I used to be the job of taking the kids off the bus and putting them on as the after-school director, before and after-school director. I can assure you on the corner of Sandwich Road and Tamarack, you'll see about 20 kids in the morning. Never mind on the corner of Deepwood and Sandwich Road. Okay, so now you have 300 units, then you're gonna have 600, then you're gonna have 900. So you're gonna have 400 kids at 375 Sandwich Road trying to get on and off an elementary school bus? Oh, so there's only spots for five vehicles. Oh boy, I'm not a mathematician, but that doesn't seem right to me. The schools will need to be rebuilt, redistricted, bike lanes, sidewalks. How much will that make our taxes go up for the greedy pockets of this developer? How will traffic on Sandwich Road as well as Brick Kiln 20 and potentially 151 be affected? Noise? For well over a year plus as this area why they clear-cut wood chippers all day long. The loud echo of nail guns. I know that sound, my husband's a contractor, it is loud. All day long, never mind excavation trucks, cement trucks, crews of contractors, workers, ruining your privacy as abutters and forget your sleep. Never mind the light pollution. This is a city. This isn't a small development. Most importantly, is this truly affordable for our town community workers and their families? The rents proposed, as well as the trash and HOA fees and amenities, are ridiculously high for anyone who needs affordable housing within Falmouth. And won't this up the cost of affordable housing within our town? Once more, before you attack me, I am 100% for affordable housing, but not in this way, not in this neighborhood, not in the cost of the woodland creatures and the waterways who are the residents of this parcel of land and the abutting parcels. The Town of Falmouth Select People, the Town of Falmouth ZBA, Coonamessett River Organization, the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe, State Representative David Vieira, action is needed to stop this now. Please visit SaveSandwichRoadNow.com. Thank you.
Do we have your name for the record, please? We just need your name for the record, please.
Kathleen Crowley Braga, 63 Deepwood Drive.
Thank you, ma'am.
Evening, sir. Board of Trust. Peter Cooper, 102 Meredith Drive. There are a few things that brought up, and I thought under 40B, they have to put in homes that are equivalents thereof of adjacent streets, which would be capes, split levels, and ranches, not 4-story buildings. They belong in a city or in the downtown area. I've also, with that, the fire apparatus is going to cost this town $1 million just to buy the apparatus for the 4-story building. Now you have to pay for 27 to 31 fire employees because you've got 3 shifts, 7 days a week. So figure out how much it's going to cost to have a fireman. They're going to be able to make it. The other thing now is that I'm bringing up is the fact of the environmental impact, where I've learned from my schooling, is that we have out there, and we do have pictures of them, and it's of all times of the years, we have out there 9 species of animals native to the region, and we have deer, possums, a milk snake I came across last year, first time I've seen one since I was 10. We have owls, we have the hawks, we have coyotes, we have the box turtles. We also have, and I want to do a little research on it, and I've gotten hold of a government agency, but we have what's referred to as the New England cottontail. And this New England cottontail is considered under 2 government agencies that it's in jeopardy. And at least we had a problem with, we'd had some problems with the coyotes in the area, which kind of like disappeared. And at least the rabbit will have a better chance at living instead of it being an hors d'oeuvre. But I think with all that, and here's one that I took of last year of a hawk in my backyard. And I have one when I'm sitting in my room watching TV. One lands down on the back porch. And I found it very unusual. So we do have the species that are there. And the trees that are out in that back behind the house are the one that I showed last time, 60 to maybe 70 years old. But those trees, and I checked to find out what they were referred to as a old growth forest. I don't classify that as old growth, but I would say those trees are about 70 to 125 years old. That section of the land has never been worked. The front section, from what I've heard, was where the strawberry beds were. That was that area that's, they got the curve they don't want to put because of the outhouse type of thing. But I just want you to know that it will be environmentally impact the town. So if the town wishes to pay out $1 million for a fire apparatus and figure each fireman gets $27,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year, times for 3 shifts, 3 men on a shift, you figure how many it's going to cost. Now, also, there was a thing being said that if the nitrogen, who's going to be held accountable if this thing goes through? And I still would like to know why is apartment buildings going in a residential area? The closest one, where? Procton? Or do we have something down in Hyannis now? But it's a city, isn't it? This is the suburb. This is where they have capes, split levels, and ranches. Not apartment buildings, except in the downtown districts where there's industry. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Tanya Lewandowski, 363 Sandwich Road. You've heard from me before. Thank you for your patience again this evening. I won't reiterate things that I've already brought on. However, just want to make my first point is I think it's been iterated several times this evening. The lack of information, the lack of data to make an informed decision is absolutely imperative. For those reasons, I absolutely employ you to deny this permit in its totality, not in any sort of other sectional areas. And I'll illustrate briefly as to why I actually believe into this. We've spoken ad infinitum in regard to the nitrogen load. That is a truth. I've worked at a tertiary plant in my previous occupations, and I'm also a wildlife biologist and have also worked on nitrogen loads here on Cape Cod, specifically in Wacoit Bay area. What we have the potential of doing to Green Pond and to the Great Pond and all the other watershed areas is to create a beautiful algal mat of eutrophied nothingness. We can probably kill a lot of our shellfish, really affect a lot of the rest of the habitat. This really is very, very important to me. And in my 30-plus years of working in this type of work, I'm very, very concerned about this. And then there's other scientists that have spoken earlier in regard to this as well. There is no real science that's been presented that really can, 30, 20, 100, whatever those numbers are, any sort of load right now is not in our best interest for the town or for the environment. I really want to also really employ looking at our hydrology reports. We're looking at pulling up, again, spoken before about having a lack of fresh water, trying to be, very conservative about our usage, adding this type of a space with hardscapes, with, and if you want to call a hydrangea a native plant, good for you, but I know pitch pines are in my backyard and some other types of hardwoods that have actually been there for about 100 years in the woods there. So there's a concern. The wildlife, we don't have a proper census. I do not think that the Goddard report was accurate. I do know that there are kettle holes and wetlands there. In 2016, we actually did a survey, a walkthrough, and we did have a mapping thereof, not GIS reports that are 10, 20 years old, even 5 years old. They're not going to be implicit of that. This is one of the reasons the nitrogen load and some of the wildlife research or presentations that were given to the town in 2016 stopped at 25 housing units to be developed there. Now we're looking at 300 up to 900. Not a mathematician, just a scientist. But in honesty, that really doesn't make sense to me. The species that are there, definitely we could actually even have, even in the disturbed area, some of the sand plains giardia, that is an endangered plant species that would do an all stop in the state for any sort of development. We do have research and evidence of different other wetland species. Now the sand plains is not a wetlands, that would be more like in the disturbed kind of sand pit area. That shows up mainly in the August time period. So if we did a later 3-week type of survey, that might actually show some of those creatures. And of course, looking at many of the other fauna that go through, there's just a myriad of raptors. I can name at least 9 different species that I see there on a regular basis. So it really is a very rich area. To segment that type of space, that's one of the few corridors that we have that goes east-west. You're going to shut off all of those north-south wildlife lands that go alongside the Coonamessett, and then the open space that's across the street on Sandwich Road. So now we speak of Sandwich Road, and we're looking at the traffic. Now, I don't know if any fauna, myself included, can barely get across Sandwich Road right now. Adding another, 900 vehicles to that space would be absolutely implicit. It would be very difficult and very unsafe. I also think that having this Quonset hut or whatever it might be, for a couple of kids to stand underneath, and I can't remember the individual that spoke up here that made the great observation. I've lived at that home for 25 years, so I know that land, and I'm 50 feet from the edge of that space. We have northeasters. I think we kind of experienced one of those a couple minutes ago. And no, there wouldn't be a child that wouldn't get blown down Sandwich Road with those type of, and no disrespect to the engineer. Very kind gentleman. I know he's trying to do what he has to do, but it just doesn't make sense for the traffic and for the safety. Having a 10-foot bicycle road or multi-use type of Eingangsweg, if you will. Makes no sense to go onto the superhighway of two-lane Sandwich Road doing 50 miles an hour. It just doesn't make any sense. You have a road to nowhere or a space to nowhere. It doesn't help the town of Falmouth at all. Light pollution hasn't been really addressed, in my opinion, whatsoever, especially for the egress and the road that goes into there. That's what affects me. I don't have a 3-foot berm that's going to stop the lights that are going to look right into my barn, into my home. I mean, I'm not looking forward to that. I know I have neighbors that also are rather very concerned about that. And having some sort of space. Any sort of those mitigations wouldn't make a difference to me. I really honestly believe having any of this type of project is not in the tune of what Falmouth needs. We had other individuals speaking about how affordable housing should be disseminated, be part of our community, not just kind of a reason to put up a multi-structure that does not look like Cape Cod and any Cape Cod I've ever lived on. I don't visit Cape Cod, I live on Cape Cod. And we're agricultural land. I bought that land because I wanted agricultural land. I wanted to be in an agricultural area. I didn't want to live in a suburb of a city and in a multiplex type of community. So I'm just wanted to kind of push a couple of those comments out there, and I'm hoping that with all of these concerns that the board will deny this project in its totality, and especially because of the lack of information. So thank you very much for your time.
Hi, Wendy Bissler, president of the Coonamessett River Trust. I also live on Lakeview Avenue, very nearby. I again want to address the issue of the desperate need for doing a habitat evaluation of this property. I want to point out to you this information that you may not be aware of, that part of the property is identified as critical natural landscapes on the Massachusetts biomap. I don't know if you've been aware of this. The biomap was put together by the Mass Department of Fisheries and Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy. And the reason why it was has been put together is to identify critical habitats and ecosystem lands that are in need of conservation. Now, the part of this property is identified as a critical natural landscape. And those are areas that have been minimally impacted by development and that serve as buffers and connectors to core habitats. Now, on this map, the Coonamessett River is identified as a core habitat. The entire corridor is identified as a core habitat, and then some of the adjacent lands along the river are identified as this critical natural landscape. The core habitats are lands that are critical for the long-term persistence of rare species, exemplary natural communities, and resilient ecosystems. So the corridor is identified as this core habitat. And like I said, the natural landscape is is identified along the river due to its connection to the river. And part of this land is in that critical natural landscape. So this designation by the biomap, it shows that this land plays a very important role to the adjacent land to the Coonamessett sensitive riparian habitats, and that this property is likely a wildlife corridor linking the wooded uplands on this property to the wetlands bordering the river. Therefore, I really urge you to please push and demand that this habitat evaluation happen. We know already that there's the eastern box turtles on this property. They're also on the Coonamessett River. There are likely other species of importance on this property. I don't know how it is possible to evaluate this project without this very important information. You have to know what impact this development will have on not only this critical landscape, but also the Coonamessett River and the links and how it links to it. Thank you so much.
I'm Cheryl O'Hare from 371 Sandwich Road. And I have two things I wanted to, just mention. The first one is, I think, originally when this happened, I was panicking that if a comprehensive permit is granted with all kinds of waivers, that meant that those waivers would be in place for that property, and it would just run rampant out of control. And somebody explained to me very clearly that that wasn't the case, that as soon as this 300-unit development is completed, the rest of any future building would not be outside the realm of our normal zoning laws. But by virtue of this development being outside the scope of our zoning laws, doesn't that, by definition, mean there will be no future building? You can't grant a permit to build something on a property that has already exceeded what our zoning laws allow, correct? No? Awesome. The other thing is I'm starting to feel a little bit like Horton Hears a Who, because I don't live on, we don't live on, I'm zoning out, in the Tanglewood, Meredith neighborhood, and we're not to the north of it. We are on the west end, sitting in the corner of 371 Sandwich Road. Now, in fairness, we were approached and we were offered an opportunity to contact them to discuss any mitigating factors they could offer us. But I haven't heard a word since. And every single map the problem that I have is every single map that we're shown, every drawing, every photo, every beautiful artistic rendering of this is completely different. It's not accurate, because if it was, my house would have been in that photo that they showed earlier. My house is actually in the photo. It's conveniently missing from theirs, but it's there. My house, my window is closer to the street than Mr. Pucci is to me right now. You don't understand. I need you to clearly understand. I would like to bring my own rendering of what my home in comparison to this property looks like, but he hasn't provided a consistent measurement in 5 months. I don't understand where it's going to be in relation to my window, because every single time he shows it, discusses it, or offers a new rendering, it's different. So I'm asking for, so if I understand it, you guys are getting together on the 25th to do a site walkthrough, and then the meeting is on the 28th?
No, the meeting's later on the 25th.
Oh, okay. Is there any, but he has to give you, or he's going to give you a completed new blueprint of his plan 7 days prior? Will that be published on the website so that I can see it?
Maureen?
Yes, so any submissions we receive, we will put on the website.
So I'll get to see how close he is to my house before the next meeting? Okay, thank you. I guess those answered my two questions.
Good evening, Betsy Gladfelter, West Falmouth. I have two procedural questions. One is, we'll follow up on the question that just came up. Mr. Pucci, did you mention that or through you, Mr. Morse, that there was a recommended wildlife study or habitat study that came in from Goddard? Is that correct? Is that on the website? I just looked and I don't see it posted there.
It was a letter that, it's a short letter. It described the scope of what a wildlife, a habitat study would B by Mr. Goddard.
Yeah, I'm just asking if it's posted on the website.
Noreen, I have to defer to you as to what's currently up. I've not looked in the last 48 hours.
I will double check. I'm not
It was,
sure.
it was on this PowerPoint I noticed on the developers that he had tonight. He had it at the bottom.
I will make sure that it is posted.
Okay.
Is this-
And the second question I have,
One right here for you.
you have a copy? Yeah. Oh, okay, I'll pick it up at the end. And the second question I have is the field trip on the 28th. Is that correct? 25th, sorry. The field trip on the 25th. Isn't that an open meeting? I mean, isn't that a public meeting? And doesn't a public meeting under open meeting law require that the public can attend?
I believe you're correct. I'm going to defer to council to answer
Yeah,
that question.
there's a slightly different rule for a site visit. They're going to post it, but it's private property, so the developer does have the opportunity to exclude third parties if they so choose.
So the board can meet as a public meeting, but the public can't be
Right, the board is not to deliberate on the project or anything like that. It's for the site visit.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to clarify it because I know there are people who would like to participate in that. However, what Jerry mentioned is I could probably participate because I also am a special town employee.
Conservation Commission.
I think what I'd recommend, Mr. Chair, is to have, communication through Noreen to the applicant, and they can check in advance about the attendees or intended attendees, and then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would want to go, but I know there are other people who would want to go. So I'd like that sort of clarified.
Certainly. I'm happy to submit, if there's people who wish to go, I'm happy to submit through the zoning administrator a list of names, but with the understanding that it's private property, we can't compel anyone, other than I would suggest members of the zoning board and our special counsel, or they've indicated that the conservation agent would be welcome at this point. But so
Okay.
we'd be happy to submit names. I can't guarantee that they would say assent to them.
Okay, thanks very much.
Certainly. Mr. Cooper?
If I may, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm going to try to put together for the next time the photographs, the addresses of where the wildlife was taken, so that if you want to check it out later, you may do so, because it's all along Meredith Drive in that area. So if one is needed, I know I've got turkey, I've got rabbit, the possum, and also the hawk. I got all those pictures taken because they come to enjoy the bird feeder. Very good. Thank you, sir.
Any other public comment? So our next scheduled meeting is April 25th here. Will be regarding agenda items. Is there anything that, or clarification the applicant needs from us about what we'd like to be discussing at the next meeting? Anything else we want to add to the agenda for that evening? Noreen? George?
No, that would be a pretty lengthy discussion on if they go point by point on the appeals report. There's a lot in there. Be great to get a yes on the habitat study too in the meantime. Just give a final request.
They indicated they're going to give that to us next meeting, so we can start with that question. If there's no other business before, Noreen? Yes, just to be clear, the board is asking for reconsideration on the wildlife study, to be clear. You indicated that you would get back to us at the next meeting, just for the purpose of the record. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. All right, if there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn until the April 25th meeting?
So moved.
Mr. Finner, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Peters, second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.